All right, we get things rolling on the Krueger Show on a Wednesday. Just listen to Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch address the media. Sorry, I'm a little late to the show because I thought the timing was going to be a little earlier on the presser. So we made the show for noon, and then of course they talked. We're supposed to talk at 11:30. Thought it would be over by noon. Anyway, here we are. It is 12:36 on a Wednesday, and John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan just addressed the media in Santa Clara, and now we want to hear from you. And I put the caller link in the chat, and I'll do it again here for those of you who want to join. And we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to get your thoughts, and I'll put it once again right here in the chat. So I hope everybody, anybody who wants to jump in via calls can. Let me just give you a quick summary, and then we'll go to the calls. Okay, first of all, the media just got right in on it, and are you content to go with Brock Purdy and Trey Lance as your quarterback room next year? And, Shanahan and Lynch said absolutely. There's two guys there that they can win with in their mind. That's Shanahan said we have two starters there we can win with, that they're content with Purdy and Lance as a combination. They're likely to bring in a third quarterback, it sounds like, but if you're hoping for Aaron Rodgers, it doesn't sound like that's the direction they're going to go. Now, Shanahan did indicate that he thought it was a 6-month recovery for Purdy, and that Purdy would likely, have 3 months and then start throwing. And then 3 months later, he thinks he's going to be back to the old Brock Purdy. So it sounds like Purdy is likely going to miss the start of OTAs, but would be there for training camp. And this is all pending a safe and timely recovery from whatever surgery he has. Now, Dan Patrick had a doctor on today, and that doctor said that it sounded like it needed a Tommy John elbow reconstruction. This is why you can't. This is why you should never do what never have doctors on to speculate. Because, is the guy a doctor? Yeah, but does he know Brock Purdy? No. Has he looked at Brock Purdy's elbow? No. He's just some guy with a degree who's calling in on the Dan Patrick show. So take it for what it's worth. People ran with that, like Brock Purdy's done for all of next year, and the doctor on Dan Patrick's show knows, and he's not Brock Purdy's doctor. So we just need to. I know people don't like to be patient, but you're going to have to be patient on this one. We're going to have to be patient to figure out exactly the extent of the injury, what process he goes through, what surgery, if there is a surgery, he undergoes. And I'm sure we're going to find out more details about that in the weeks ahead. But Shanahan seemed to be adamant that Purdy would be back in 6 months. So at least from their public stance, that's their public stance. Trey Lance is supposed to be back ready and to hit the field in 3 or 4 weeks. So they've got two quarterbacks, and it sounds like they're content to go forward and just let those guys compete. And then, Grant asked if would Brock be the starter going into camp? Shanahan didn't want to touch that at all. He's like, I haven't begun to even think about that. I mean, he just put that one away and was like, no, I'm not answering that question. But he did say Lance will be able to go by OTAs, and it sounds like Purdy would be able to go by training camp. Now, they said they're currently working on coaching hires. Anthony Lynn, Bobby Slowick have both asked for the ability to interview elsewhere. And obviously, as you all know, D'Amico jumped to the Houston Texans, and there's some talk that he may want to take some of the defensive staff with him. Chris Kosarek is maybe on the top of that list. So we will see. And as far as a replacement for D'Amico, no names were thrown out. It sounds like they're going to look internally. They're going to look externally, but it sounds like that's number one on their plate right now. As far as definitive answers, will Jimmy Garoppolo be back? The answer was no. He didn't hedge. He didn't hem. He didn't go, well, there could be. No, Jimmy Garoppolo is gone. So, if he had said, Jimmy's out of here, Jimmy's gone, Jimmy's never going to wear a Niner uniform again. I mean, he could have said it any way he wanted to say it, but he basically was real clear. Jimmy is not coming back. Um, as far as, are they in favor of bringing in a third quarterback, bringing back that third quarterback rule that the NFL had initially and then went away from it? Lynch and Shanahan both said that they are for that. And that just states that if your first two quarterbacks get hurt, you can go to a third quarterback so you don't have the situation that the Niners had. And I think just for TV purposes, when the NFL looks at the TV ratings at the beginning of that game, how many people were engaged, and then looked at the TV ratings as that game went on, I think it's going to paint a very clear picture that it's really in their best economic interest to bring back that third quarterback rule, which just states if the first two guys can't play, you got a third guy there. So I think that's probably coming back. As far as they were asked, what is the profile of the next quarterback that you're going to bring in to it sounds like they're going to bring in a veteran quarterback, and I'll go through some of the names out here. And I've got a name that I think you guys are going to not know, but I think it makes a lot of sense for the 49ers. And if I had to predict, it would be the guy that I would predict they will go get. I'll give you that in a little bit. But Shanahan was asked about the profile, and he just said, the best one available that fits our culture, fits our personality, and fits our cap. So those are three different things. But that's interesting. And then, Lynch, as far as they were asked about Tom Brady and his retirement, and Lynch just said, hey, respect, nothing but respect and appreciation for Tom Brady. We'll talk more about that in a bit as well. John Lynch said that he will indeed stay on as the general manager in 2023, saying, I'm committed. I really like John's comments as well about the Philly game. He says it wasn't in the cards. I think that's probably the best. It's not just diplomatic. I think it's also accurate. It just wasn't in the cards to beat Philadelphia. And then John went and said something that I also echoed in my post game right after the game, which is I would welcome a Niners, a 2023 49er team, 2022, 2023, this year's Niner team playing this year's Eagle team with a healthy Brock Purdy. I say bring that on. So, and obviously we're never getting that. We're never going to get that because Purdy's hurt. The teams will never be the same. We're never going to find out the answer to that. But I really believe the 49ers would have fared very well if Brock Purdy had been healthy. And it's clear from that quote from Lynch that he feels the same way. Shanahan revealed that today they're doing a lot of their player exit interviews today. D'Amico Ryans, of course, as you all know, has left for Houston. As far as will he take San Francisco assistants with him to Houston, Shanahan said, I'll have to talk to D'Amico about that, and it will involve the families and like where people want to be, where people want to live. So it sounds like they may have to have like a little head coach negotiation between Shanahan and D'Amico for some of the top assistants. Shanahan said he'd like to keep the current defensive staff and scheme. So when you're talking about replacements, I don't think they want to change up the scheme. I think they like their scheme. They like their defensive staff. They'd like to have somebody who can step into their defensive staff and make it all work. Now, is that Vic Fangio? I don't know. There's a couple other guys that have been listed as candidates as well. I don't know which of them would be a change in philosophy and which of them would be taking on the 49er philosophy. And some of it is up to the coach himself and how flexible do they want to be with what their initial plan is. Some coaches are like, hey man, I'm a 3-4 coach and I'm not going anywhere else. I'm coaching 3-4. Well, the Niners are a 4-3 defense right now. So it's a 4-3 with a wide 9 look with Kosaric running the defensive line. Do they go with somebody who wants to give them more of the same? It sounds like they don't want to tear it down, change the entire scheme, and have to change out a bunch of players along the way. They want to keep their scheme, keep their staff, and add a new coordinator. So they were asked if they take player opinions into their coaching hires or factor them into their coaching hires. They said yes. As far as I thought it was really interesting. They talked about Emmanuel Mosley. He said he's rehabbing his knee. He's a free agent. They indicated they want him back. Thought that was kind of interesting. Shanahan, I thought, had the most interesting line of the whole thing to me. Now, everybody's got something different. I would love to know from you what interests you. But he says this year's team he said that he felt like this year's team had the best chance. He was talking about the Niners' ability and chances to win the Super Bowl. He said this year it felt the best. He says our players were focused every single day. They won 12 in a row. But I think it has a lot to do also with his confidence individually in Purdy. But obviously I'm just reading that into his quote. He didn't actually say that. He said that he felt the best, though, about this year's team winning the Super Bowl. And I did too. And largely because Brock Purdy was processing what he was seeing at the line of scrimmage really, really well. And then, Shanahan brought up the stat that teams went 0-16 after playing the Niners this year. And it's something that he's really proud of, the fact that teams got up for the Niners, but the next week they paid a price for how physical the 49ers were. And lastly, they said they expected Trent Williams to return. They had no official news on that, but they did expect Trent to return. And maybe that's a little bit of wishful thinking or hopeful thinking on their part. The other interesting thing is they were asked a couple times about quarterback injuries, once at the end by Cole from Yahoo and once earlier by Grant. And they were asking, once Lynch was asked about, hey, you got 4 quarterbacks that got hurt. Is there any common denominator to the Niners and their quarterback durability issues? And Lynch said it was just a coincidence. Shanahan said that quarterbacks got hurt in all different ways and that there's no real common denominator there. So they both kind of crapped all over that theory. They went on to say that they thought the key to the salary cap was indeed having 2 quarterbacks on rookie deals. They admitted that to Tim Kawakami's question. Another indication that it doesn't sound like Aaron Rodgers is in the cards. John Lynch made it perfectly clear that Kyle's involved in player personnel decisions and that they always, John does the deep dive. Kyle gets away with his family. He says that we'll come up with a very good plan. And let's be honest, guys, they have come up with a very good plan every year. And then Lynch finished up by thanking the fans and how loud they were and pleading with them to please hang in there. He said they'll figure out an extension on Brandon Ayuk. He seemed to be more confident that they would come to an agreement with Nick Bosa on an extension. And then oddly, no questions about Javon Kinlaw, who got really thoroughly embarrassed in that Philly game. But a lot of people, or I should say a lot of people, Dave Lombardi asked about Drake Jackson. And Shanahan, I thought, showed his cards here, saying that he thought Drake showed a lot this year, but that he lost some power as the season progressed, and suggested that Drake needs to be diligent this offseason in getting his body stronger. So those are my takeaways from the presser. I got a bunch of things I want to get into here, and I definitely want to hear from you. So there's a lot of people already joining us in the chat. El Comilo Dorado says, Kyle and Larry going live at the same time. The 49ers are a mess. I don't know about that. They didn't ask me. I didn't ask them. MF, John Lynch seems very good with the media. Oh, he's awesome. Are you kidding me? John Lynch is incredible. We got this one from Michael. Who says, hey, Larry, heard you say earlier on an earlier show you went to Sac State. I knew there was a reason I liked you. I did as well. Spent more time than I should have at Club Toomey, the Pasty Shack, and the Pine Cove. There you go. Any reference to the Pasty Shack and Club Toomey gets the open clap from yours truly. Hutch Serves Gaming, who's a channel member, says, I'm glad Brady gave his news fast, and Kyle with the news that Jimmy's not coming back, which means either Lance is QB1 or they're bringing in a vet, maybe Aaron Rodgers, will be another roller coaster ride. Todd Labor says, hey, what's up, Larry? What's up, Todd? How you doing, man? Digital Drew, who's down here at the bottom, he's, you're lazy. And on that note, we bring in the man himself. You're lazy, Larry.
You're lazy, Larry.
Lazy. What's going on,
Awesome.
Drew? How's your Wednesday in Chicago?
Wednesday's going pretty good. As I got the windows open, as you can see, we actually got some sunshine, so I'm trying to soak up as much as I can.
What's the temperature? What's the temperature outside?
You know what? It's actually 25. It was a high of 4 yesterday. We've had a cold spell. It's gross. I do have a tendency to just come in here and camp on your channel. So if I get long-winded, man, feel free to boot my ass. Totally
No,
cool.
not at all. We love the video calls. You're one of our favorite video callers, and I encourage
Awesome.
everybody to join Digital Drew and join us. And we'll get through them one by one if people want to weigh in. I know this is a hot time for Niner fans.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot going on, a lot of conjecture, a lot of venting, a lot of frustration, a lot of people, showing a lot of emotion and a lot of love for this franchise, but it kind of, it shows itself in different manners. Some people get optimistic and trusting. Some people get distrusting and accusatory, and it's to each their own. But that's what we're here for.
Yeah. All right. So jumping right into it, D coordinator. Congrats to D'Amico. I think he's going to do well in Houston. I still have my reservations about an organization grabbing a defensive-minded coach, given how hard it is to innovate on offense. I still think he's going to do great. I think he's got a bright future ahead of him. So, congrats, D'Amico. Thanks for all the years, man. Props to you and good luck. But with the D coordinator and the statement in the presser that the Niners do not want to change schemes, does this effectively count out Fangio, or do you think Fangio potentially can mix it up and work within a wide nine? I don't know if he's actually committed to Miami. I know there were some reports, but those were shot down.
Vic is such a defensive master that I just feel like, without knowing him, I mean, I know he's coached a lot of 3-4, but I don't know that that he has to be exclusively 3-4. And this is a guy who's been around the block. I mean, this guy's, he played safety in the mid 70s and he's been coaching since Dunmore High School in 1979.
Good
And then
lord.
he's at North Carolina, and he's in the USFL and the Saints, where he started his NFL career in '86. He coached with Carolina. He was a linebacker coach. He was a defense coordinator in Indy, in Houston, in Baltimore. Linebacker coach in Baltimore. Then he was Stanford's defense coordinator. Then the Niners and the Bears. Then the Broncos head coaching gig, 2019 through 2021, and I guess right now he's a defensive consultant for the Eagles. I didn't even realize that. Did you realize he was
Wow.
currently a defensive consultant for the Eagles?
I had no idea he had ties to any other organization right now.
Yeah, I guess this year he
That's
was uh
news.
he was a defensive consultant for the Eagles. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if Vic can coach, a 4-3 or if he's strictly a 3-4. Um I can't remember seeing a 4-3 defense anywhere he's been, but I bet you he could. I bet you he could. I mean, and a lot of these fronts, I mean, we've talked about this. A lot of them are hybrid fronts. A lot of them, you'll see the Niners, as a 4-3 defense, but at times it looks like you're looking at a 5-2 look. Dallas showed a 5-2 look with Parsons on the line of scrimmage, five-man surface, as they say. Seattle had a 4-3 technically, but when you watch them, it was a 5-2 with two stack backers and five guys on the line of scrimmage. So there are teams that go in and out of 3-4, 4-3. So maybe, we're past that era of, teams run only this or only that. And now maybe they jump in and out of concepts. But that's a good one. I don't know. I know this. I know he's a very popular guy with Shanahan. I know Fangio is very popular with the Niner ownership. And I do find it interesting that, he sounded like days ago he was on his way to Miami. And then when Mike Silver touched base with him, he's like, hey, as far as I'm concerned, I'm still free. So I don't know if that means that just he hasn't put his name on the contract and he's just playing coy and he's still planning to go to Miami, or if there's been a phone call saying that, hey, by the way, D'Amico is the front runner in Houston and he's going to get that job. And we'd like you here as the defensive coordinator. And you got to remember this too. You don't know there's a cap in the NFL on players, but there's no cap on coaches or assistant coaches. So essentially, one job title could have two totally different values based on what the contract looks like in from two different teams. So, you know, it's to say he's going to be why? Because people are like, well, why would he pass up the Dolphins defensive coordinator position to just take a lateral move with the Niners? Because just because it's lateral in title doesn't mean it's lateral in compensation. So the
Sure.
49ers could say to Vic, hey, what's Miami paying you? They're paying me 2.5 million. We'll double it. You can come here for 5. I mean, literally, if you wanted to get an upper hand on other teams, the only way you could use your financial muscle in the old Eddie D ways is by hiring coaches and overpaying them. So I think that's interesting. I'm interested to see if Kosaric would jump with D'Amico to Houston. In fact, Art Martinez
Yeah.
throws in a super chat. He says we should make Kosaric one of the highest paid coaches. It's going to be hard because of him being from Texas. Oh, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize he was a
Oof.
Texas guy. Yeah, so maybe that could be something that Shanahan was referencing there, is that maybe they are going to lose Kosaric to the Texans. Maybe he's going with D'Amico, and it wouldn't shock me, because you know what? I've met a lot of people traveling the country as a scout, as a radio guy for the last 30 years, 25 years, and if I meet somebody from the Midwest and they're out here in the Bay Area, they're always like, I always say, you going back to the Midwest? No, hell no. I meet somebody from the East Coast. Hey, you going back to the East Coast? No, 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 man. I love it here. But you meet people from Texas and you say, hey, you staying here? You move? Oh man, I just can't wait to get back to Texas. So I don't know. Sometimes people from Texas have this odd affinity to Texas. I mean, look at Sonny Dykes. Sonny Dykes came out here and basically told me towards his end of his tenure, he's like, hey man, the wife wants to go back to Texas, and so he went to
I don't get it.
SMU and now he's at TCU, and you know what I mean? So I
Yeah, I
don't get it.
spent
I don't get it either. I've been to Texas a bunch of times. There's nothing wrong with Texas. I like it. I just
yeah.
I like visiting. Well, I shouldn't say I like it. I like Dallas. I like Austin. I would never spend I wouldn't even, if I was in Houston, I wouldn't even go outside if I could avoid it. I mean, the weather is just, it makes Chicago humidity in the summertime look like nothing.
Oh, yeah,
It's, the
I spent
humidity is
6
crazy.
months. I spent 6 months in San Antonio in the military, at the medical school there, and no, you can keep it. You can keep all of it. I absolutely hated it.
What do you think of San
So yeah,
Antonio's weather? I mean, that's even further south. It's probably hotter, but maybe not quite as humid as
yeah,
Houston. I don't know. What do you think?
yeah, it's well, my opinion is incredibly skewed because again, it was for the military. So I was coming from Fort Knox, Kentucky, and it was during January when I was there, so we were sub-zero temperatures, 4 or 5 feet of snow on the ground. They put us on a plane and drop us in San Antonio. So you go out in a giant parka and then you show up in the desert basically. And you're like, okay, I mean, half of us getting off the plane were half naked coming through the terminal. It was just, we were dying. So, and it took about 3 months to actually adapt to that weather, but I just didn't like it. No, you can keep it. Uh, so speaking of the coaches,
Yeah,
Sloak and Lynn, they're getting a lot of attention now. They could end up jumping ship. Are there comp picks associated with those assistant coaches, like there would be with D'Amico, or do they have to be coordinator or higher to generate comp picks?
I believe it's coordinator or higher. I don't think you get a comp pick if Anthony Lynn leaves to go be the running back coach somewhere. I don't think you get a comp pick. I'm not even sure if it's coordinators. Is it coordinators?
Yeah, D'Amico's going to net third rounder.
But he's a head
Who was?
coach. But he's going to be the head coach. I'm saying,
Lateral moves don't apply.
well,
Okay.
I think you have to be called. You have to be named the head coach. If you're a head
Hmm.
coach, right? Don't you get the picks?
Well, there was
Or
also an admin.
Casala went and he was the head coach. And
Yeah,
personnel guys, like I think it's head. I thought it was head coach or GM, because also the Niners got a
Yeah.
pick when
Okay.
Martin Mayhew became the GM elsewhere, and they also got an extra two. What you do is you get 2 third-round picks, and they're not from the other team; they're just after the third round, and so they'll
Yeah.
get one in this draft and one in the next draft. If they lose 2 minority coaches in the same off season, you don't get 4 picks. I believe you get 3. So I think that's how that works. But
Be
yeah, I
interesting
don't
to
like
see.
if Anthony Lynn goes to become somebody's offensive coordinator, I don't think they get comp picks there.
All right. So with Jimmy, we've heard it before. We've heard Shanahan say, "Nope, nope, not going to happen. Not going to do it." He said it again today. What's the likelihood if you were to put a percentage on Jimmy returning? Where do you put it? All knowledge in right now.
I would say less than 5%, you know. And why? Because there are people, I don't spend a lot of time talking to Jimmy, but there are media people that do. And I've noticed that those media people have been like almost cocky in how adamant they are that Jimmy's moving on. So I think that Jimmy has told them he's moving on. They're also, at the when Jimmy redid his deal to come back to the Niners this year, the language included no ability for the 49ers in any way to keep him by any maneuver. So they can't
Mm.
they can't tag him, restrict him. He's unrestricted free agent with the ability to leave. Now the question is, would he choose the Jets? The Jets are going for a veteran, and obviously there are limits there. Do they want Derek Carr? Do they want Jimmy Garoppolo? Do they want Aaron Rodgers? You're gonna have to trade for Rodgers. The other guys you might have to trade for Carr. Jimmy's out there for nothing. So I think the Jets will be definitely an option. And I guess there's a chance that the 49ers, he could be looking at some really bad football teams, and maybe, the 49ers could come calling, but it just doesn't seem like it's going to happen. I'm not saying there's bad blood there, but it just seems like the 49ers they're they've got they got that money already earmarked for Bosa, for Ayuk, for other guys. I don't think it's going to go to Jimmy, and I don't think Jimmy's going to take any kind of discount either. So I think Jimmy's probably moving on. Now, you never know if it turns out that it's a really bad football team, or starting with the Niners, and let's say you know they determine that Trey's not ready to roll, but I mean, it just, the way Shanahan said no. If these guys are so cards close to the vest, they're so aware of all the different scenarios, that if they had any intention or desire at all to bring him back at any price, I think they probably would have said, "Hey, you never know. See what the future holds." But they squashed that thing today in a way that makes me think it's over. It's over. Don't
Well,
you think?
fingers crossed.
Would
I think it's
you'd like it to be over?
100%. I
Yeah.
think we have to find out what Trey is all about. This has to be his team. I wish I did see the report by some doctors saying he has to have Tommy John. There was even tweets
Right.
about it. Uh, who knows if he does if Purdy does stick to the 6 month window? I am all for putting both of those guys in camp, not calling a starter until a week before week one, letting them duke it out, letting the best man win. I think that's huge for the esprit de corps amongst the team, is to say, no, that guy won it. He earned it. That's so key. And that's something Trey did not have last year, because they just parked Jimmy off to the side. They had a bunch of different lesser quarterbacks in camp. They just anointed him. And that just never works out well within an organization, especially one as tight as the Niners are right now. You got to let these guys duke it out, and we have to see that. Otherwise, it's not going to work out for Trey. Purdy he can point to those games that he had this year, and that's great. But there's always going to be those questions, and there's those 3 first-round picks hanging over this organization's head that they either need to say he's got it, and we're going to put him in and he's going to start, or he's not. We've made a mistake. We're going to try to get something for him and let him go.
I know. And yet it doesn't sound like they're on the verge of moving Trey. There's a huge penalty. I think it's like a $10 million hit if they do trade Trey. So it just doesn't seem like trading Trey is going to be in the cards. And then when you sit there and think about the situation, you gotta have options at quarterback. I mean, I tend to agree with Shanahan and Lynch that it's more coincidence than somehow negligence. I mean, let's be honest. There are people, Niner creators, that are sitting there coming for Shanahan, coming for Lynch, and basically saying the Niners are negligent, that they're the reason that they have so many injured quarterbacks, that it's not coincidence, as Lynch said, that it's something that they're doing or not doing. I always look at things personnel wise, and to me, there's one primary thing that has happened that has affected the offensive line, and that is that the Niners have swung and missed on the defensive line, and they prioritized the defensive line over the offensive line every year. And so you took Solomon Thomas in the top 5. He was a bust. So you had to draft Javon Kinlaw, but then now Kinlaw is a top first round pick, and he looks like a bust. So they've gone D tackle, D line more than they should have, because they hit on Armstead, they hit on Bosa, but they missed on a couple guys. One of those picks should have been devoted to an offensive tackle, but it wasn't, because they felt like they had missed on Solly and they had to have a blue chip. They let Buckner go in a trade, and they had to find an impact guy, and they decided Kinlaw was it. But, I think that if you want to say what's their issue, I think that's really the issue. They missed on Solly. It forced them to reach for Kinlaw and draft for need. They passed on Wirfs. They've now looking at an offensive line that you got Trent Williams and Aaron Banks and Burford. Brendel had a good year at center, but he's a little underwhelming as far as pop in the run game. I don't know that he moves anybody really in the run game. They struggled to run the ball up the middle. They struggled to run the ball in short yardage. I think Brendel was a downgrade from Alex Mack. So do they need to upgrade from Brendel? I don't know about that, because he he's a free agent, I believe, and also he was an alternate Pro Bowl alternate today or this year. So, and then McGlinchey is clearly moving on. I've got the list of free agent offensive tackles, and it's not a great list.
No,
if you look at the options, McGlinchey might be one of the better tackles available, and
he is.
And I don't know that he's going to get paid, and they're going to have a lot of competition for Mike McGlinchey. So,
yeah, I think you called it earlier. He's going to go back east. I definitely think you probably find him on a Miami squad, or you find him with the Jets. And this whole line of conversation kind of goes into my third part about who's to blame for all this stuff. I think all these points that everybody's making can all be true at the same time. I think missing in the draft. I think scheme fit. Not paying attention to certain things. I heard a stat today, and I went to look it up briefly, so don't quote me on this, but I think between the Jets, the Dolphins, and the Niners, they had a total of 10 injured quarterbacks this year. Those are 3 coaches out of the Shanahan tree, and 10 injured quarterbacks. I'm like, okay, at some point, the numbers just become too much to identify. So if you look at it, you're like, okay, yeah, you are putting way too much priority on the defensive line, and your scheme exposes your quarterbacks to take unnecessary risks at times. I think that's absolutely true. And they're not investing on the offensive line. The zone blocking scheme that Shanahan runs does require a certain type of defensive or offensive lineman to go after. There were other free agents on the market that the Niners had passed on in the past because they don't fit that scheme. So you end up with people who either potentially are just not great in pass blocking or have a very specific skill set that they want to utilize. But just like anything, accepting that compromise will leave holes. And another thing
the
I want
Niners
to point
love their
out,
empty set. They love to run the empty set with, five eligibles out and make the defense spread out and cover guys. And, if you have a quarterback that processes fast and can get it out fast, it can be you put a lot of pressure on a defense. I get that. But it also leaves your tackles out there on an island. Sometimes,
or your tight ends.
Or your tight end. I mean, it really puts a premium on nobody missing a block.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And for contrast on this, we know Bosa was, one of the top 3 disruptive players this year on the defensive line. Go back through the last 4 or 5 games, specifically the playoffs, and go watch how many times Bosa is left on a tight end, or is left on a running back, or is left just solo on a tackle. that will give you an indication of where the priority is for the other team against that type of player. And I think Shanahan, for all his positives, definitely does not account for those playmaking people on the front seven of the other team specifically. He doesn't necessarily scheme around him. So when you do that, you open the door for people like Reddick or people like Chris Jones, as we remember in the Super Bowl, just absolutely terrorizing us. And Shanahan doesn't have an answer. So I think a lot of that ends up in a position where you're playing the odds that you're going to have your quarterback exposed at some point. And he doesn't seem to make those mid-game adjustments. I think that's a fair criticism of Shanahan. He needs to make those in-game adjustments to what's going on the field. He seems a bit stubborn at times or doesn't have the insight to make that adjustment. I don't know. But I think all of it leads to you get a lot of people hurt. You get a lot of quarterbacks hurt.
Well, and I also think, some of these teams, if you're really, really stout inside, like Philly, Philly's got a 4-3 defense, right? But it's essentially a 5-2 because it's Cox and Joseph and Hargrave inside, and then you have Sweat and Reddick off the edges. But by having that 5-man front, you've put a lot of pressure on your tackles to block on the edges. And if you have a special guy like Reddick, who's just had an incredible year this year, really had the bust out year of his career, it makes it challenging because now you're going to have to use a tight end, and that tight end's going to have to block. As I said before, I'm a personnel guy, so I always look at it from what the personnel side was. Croft's rep is that of a blocker. He's not considered to be an elite receiver. The book on him coming out of Rutgers was that he's a tenacious, try-hard blocker, and that his receiving was kind of his weakness. So it's not like they got some guy. It wasn't like Dwelly was out there. Dwelly's a glorified wide receiver. He's a receiving tight end. He lacks power. He lacks strength. That to me, that was more of a mismatch. If you had Dwelly blocking Reddick, now I'm with you. But to have Croft in that situation blocking Reddick, and then also, are we just evaluating the result? Because the result was you lost your quarterback and you lost the game and your chance to go to the Super Bowl. And I understand the people that are upset. They should be upset, but 3.47 seconds was what Purdy got rid of that ball in. That's not, there's quarterbacks that go entire halves with never holding the ball for more than 2.5 seconds. 3.47 is holding it. So it's a little bit on Brock. It's a little bit on his inability to recognize he needed to step up. It's a little bit on his inability to recognize where that was the weakness in the protection. And also it's just a great player making a great play. And it was bang, bang, so, I mean, we can sit here and bemoan it, and it was obviously, but it wasn't like, oh my God, Shanahan, what, it's like occasionally you're going to have a mismatch in the opponent's favor, and occasionally you're going to develop mismatches in your favor, and how you overcome that, that one just, we're literally all freaking out because of the result. The result was terrible. And so everybody's like, well, that can't happen again. Well, you know what? It's football. Quarterbacks get hit. And sometimes backup blocking tight ends have to hold their block. Now, as I said, I look at it from a personnel standpoint. I look at the Niners tight ends as they've got Kittle. He's a 1. He's a legit 1. I think the rest of those guys are 3s, and they need a second tight end. And that's one of their primary needs this offseason is a second tight end. Maybe somebody who's a little bit more all around, somebody who can block in line and be a receiver. It would be great to have a second George Kittle type tight end. But I mean, that's, those guys are hard to find, but, and you have to use high picks on them. Generally, you didn't in Kittle's case, but you know what I'm saying? It's like to sit there and just, I don't see gross negligence is what I'm saying. I see a gross negligence would have been if Reddick gave him an outside rush and somehow Croft dove at him and he knifed inside and crushed the quarterback. That's a blown block by Croft. So I can't blame Croft. He did exactly what he's supposed to do. hold the guy for a second and a half and then release him. But if you release him, don't voluntarily release him. But if you have to release him to the outside. And that's what Croft did. Unfortunately, the quarterback held the
Yeah.
ball an extra second, trying to let Ayuk free himself up. And we've got an off season of what ifs, right? Because what if Brock Purdy steps up in the pocket? What if Brock's clock was a little faster and he got rid of that? It might have been a touchdown to Ayuk from the people who saw the all 22. So it's just, but I get it. I do get it. People are frustrated. People are lashing out. People are looking for reasons. That game was over after that point. So, there's really only 2 plays in the game that really demand any kind of analysis. It's Shanahan should have called the challenge on the Devontae Smith, and it's the decision to block Reddick with Croft. And people only felt emboldened to crush Shanahan because J.J. Watt tweeted it. JJ Watt's like, oh man, you're gonna block Reddick with a backup tight end. Yeah, I mean, occasionally you're gonna take chances like that on the back end in the play action game, and you hope you can get away with it. They didn't, but to your point, maybe they need to go max protect a little bit more. Maybe they need to solidify their protection a little bit more going forward, especially when you look at the numbers for Brock when kept clean, like against Dallas. Brock in the Dallas game, when he was kept clean, completed 88% of his passes. It was like
he's a
pitch
sniper.
and catch. So protect him and protect Trey, and you're probably going to get a lot better results. Let me hit a couple of these super chats. Michael Monahan says people don't understand Tommy John for chronic injury. Keena Turner and Hooch says thinking about flying out for the Giants opening day in the Bronx. You going? First beer on me. Would love to talk Niners, Giants, and growing up in the city. You know what? I might have to. I might have to think about making a pilgrimage out to New York.
What about Chicago, Larry?
Gaming. I love Chicago. All my family lives in Chicago.
Yeah, well, let's get you out here and go to a Cubs game.
I love Chicago.
Go sit in the bleachers.
Love Chicago. Now, if you're one of these people that's never been to Chicago and all you judge Chicago is the clips that you see of people getting beaten up and attacked on the street, you have a totally wrong view of the city of Chicago. But for whatever reason, those images just keep being put out there for everybody to see.
Terrible PR.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. But I think I wouldn't go in the winter necessarily. I'd go in the summer. I think Chicago in the summertime is like it feels like a Midwestern outdoor block party. People are walking around. People are in the burbs are sitting in front of their homes. They're having a beer. They're talking to their neighbors. They're listening to the game on the radio. They're, maybe I'm dating myself a little bit because I spent a summer there in the 70s. And I swear my mom's family is huge, right? They've got thousands of relatives out there. And we'd have these parties and all these people would come by and it was incredible. And not to mention, Navy Pier, Buckingham Fountain, Wrigley Field, the Museum of Science and Industry, the Art Institute, all the great restaurants. I'm a Gino's East guy. There's Lou Malnati's. I mean, you could probably talk about it forever. Second City, Firehouse Grill. There's all kinds of great little restaurants, comedy clubs, museums, sporting events. I mean,
I've been
the
here
architecture tour on the water. That's pretty cool
it's
too.
amazing. I've done that. I've been here a decade. I've still seen I still got 75% of this city to explore. It's insane. You're never going to get caught up on it. It's just never there. Hey, Larry, last question here. I'll throw at you and then I'll get out of here. For the last 4 years, we've heard that the Niners have had the best roster in football, and yet we still don't have any rings to show for it. At what point does the organization say, hey, we got to make a change because we've put the best product on the field that we could for almost 5 years and we still don't have anything to show for it? I did hear Lowell Cohn this week make a perfect example of that, was the Mark Jackson change to Kerr with the Warriors. Mark Jackson got him to 50 wins, got him to the playoffs, huge improvement, but he wasn't the guy to get him over the hump. At what point does the organization make a change because they're just simply not doing it? There's no rings, there's no Lombardi trophies coming in. And
with Shanahan, with Lynch, or with both?
Probably Shanahan, or I think if you put it on Lynch, he's putting a good product on the field. Maybe it's what Shanahan's doing with it. I don't know. And when do you make a change? What would you have to see to make a change? When does the organization, when do you think they have to make a change? And when would Larry make the change?
Well, I definitely wouldn't make it after you spent three of the last 4 seasons reaching the NFC Championship game, right? I mean, come on, they won 12 in a row. They the plan was to go with Trey, and then they had to go with Jimmy, then they had to go with Purdy, and still they wound up in the NFC Championship game. So they're doing something right. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of teams. You think the Detroit Lions would be upset today if they went to the NFC Championship game? You think the Saints would be upset about their season if they went to the NFC Championship game? I hear what you're saying, though. This is an organization that judges itself on championships, and yet I think of Kyle Shanahan. I'm starting to see Kyle Shanahan as um, as kind of like Andy Reid in Philadelphia. He's a
Yeah.
great play caller. Everybody in the sport would agree that he's a great offensive play caller, but he hasn't been able to win the big one. And until you do it, you haven't done it, and it's on you, right? So there's no nothing, there's no nuance to this. It's on John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan to get it done. And the Niners haven't won they haven't won a Super Bowl since January of 1995. We're coming
Yeah.
up on 30 years. 30 years. It's a long time. So but Jed also has experienced Tom Sula, Chip Kelly, not to mention the Niner coaches after Walsh and Seifert. There was a run there with Dennis Erickson. That they feel like they've got a good thing going with Shanahan and Lynch. I wasn't sure about Lynch initially. Why? Because Lynch had no track record. He was a broadcaster. He was an awesome safety, but he had no track record of personnel success. So to go with Lynch, I thought was really risky. But here we are, and I think John has done a really good job. The 49ers have a very good roster. It's a deep roster. It is a deep roster. They have a lot of talent. They added a lot of young players this year. I think they're on the verge. I think this last draft was kind of like their version of the 86 Walsh draft that netted 8 starters. I think 2 years from now, you're going to see that this draft netted 10 starters, maybe more. And I think this is going to be a foundation draft or foundation off season that helps them be one of the dominant teams in the NFC. But it's also going to come down to how good is their quarterback play? And how can they get it done in the playoffs? Against the best teams in the conference. There's always going to be some contender. But if you look at it on paper, look at the NFC. The NFC's stacked. The AFC's stacked. The NFC's thin. The NFC doesn't have a team. Who in the NFC would you rather have than what the 49ers have? Maybe Philly? But
Not
other
even
than
then,
Philly,
because if you see, they are very much up and down. And I guess that's the only win is that you kind of
I mean, who's got
maybe
momentum?
we're spoiled.
Who's got
Yeah, maybe
momentum in the NFC? Dallas, maybe.
No,
But what is Dak
because it's
Prescott get anything
Dallas.
going?
Come on. Up
Brian
yours, Dallas.
Brian Dable
Screw
is a
that.
good coach, but the Giants, no, I wouldn't. They got a lot of building to do. Minnesota, I don't believe in Cousins really.
Nope.
Detroit is, do they have their quarterback of the future? Probably not. I like what they did this year, but I just saw that Deuce Staley's jumping to Carolina and Aaron Glenn's interviewing in other spots. So who knows if Dan Campbell will be able to keep that thing together. Green Bay, do you like Love as a quarterback going forward? Chicago, maybe. I like Poles as a personnel guy, and he had a good draft this year, and he added Fields, but they got a ton of building to do. Tampa has no quarterback. Carolina, no. Saints, no. I was impressed by Arthur Smith, but the Falcons don't really have a quarterback. Seattle, I like John Schneider, and they had a great draft, but they got a lot of building to do. The Rams have cap problems. I mean, see what I'm saying? I mean, look at the NFC right now. Who is The best teams in the NFC this year were the Niners, the Buccaneers, the Vikings, the Eagles, and the Cowboys. Those were the teams. Nobody else, everybody else was like 500 or worse, except for the Giants. Giants went 9-7-1. So I don't see, I'd have to say it's the Niners, the Cowboys, the Giants in the NFC East, and the Niners. And maybe the Rams, if the Rams can somehow have some incredible draft and kind of put things back together. But they get the core of their team. There's a lot of talk they're going to trade Jalen Ramsey. They've got Aaron Donald. They've got Stafford. They've got Cooper Kupp. They got a lot of money at the very top of their roster. So they're really thin on the bottom of their roster. So, you know what I'm saying? It's like the Niners are in primo position to not just win their division, but to dominate the NFC like almost nobody else outside of Philly, who has 2 number ones and Jalen Hurts. There isn't really that team. So get ready for Niners Eagles battling over the next 5 to 7 years. I mean, unless you see a team, starting to bubble up and emerge that I'm not seeing, I kind of like Atlanta. I kind of like Chicago, but I mean,
Yeah,
those
it
teams are
changes so
nowhere close.
frequently. Yeah, the NFL is so same nowadays that there is some parity there, so it's hard to say. I mean, it takes 1 or 2 moves, 1 or 2 drafts. All of a sudden, you have a powerhouse for a couple of years. So it's really hard to say. And I think it's just as true that the Niners could fall off just as quickly. Let's say you have a Trent Williams retire, you have a season-ending injury. Before you know it, hey, they're 8-8. They're 8-9. You could get some really bad seasons. I don't know. I don't know. But that's coming from an extremely spoiled Niners fans
Well, we all
Niners
want them to
fan.
win, and we all want them to, to be a perennial contender. As far as when you asked me the question before, when would I get rid of Lynch and Shanahan? Not now, not today. I think John. As I just said, I think John had an incredible offseason. I think I would give him my vote for Executive of the Year over Howie Roseman, and Kyle Shanahan's one of 5 guys up for Coach of the Year. Now, I don't think I would have voted for him. I'd probably vote for Daboll or Doug Peterson or something like that. Probably Doug Peterson, to be honest. Just when you think about Urban and all the terrible culture they had there, and just what a disarray the whole thing was. And then he steps in and they win their division, go to the playoffs. I'd probably go with Doug Peterson as Coach of the Year. But Kyle Shanahan is on that list and had a very good year coaching. And if you go, talk to the players for the most part, sometimes they speak on the record. Sometimes they're talking off the record. Sometimes they're just kind of, they're literally talking off the record and they're just talking amongst each other. They're not even, and I've been in that locker room all year. I haven't heard one whisper from any player on the record, off the record, or in any corner of the room like, man, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. Man, this guy sucks. We got to get a new coach. There is a total belief in Kyle. There's a total confidence in Lynch, and you've had Chip Kelly and Tom Sula, after Harbaugh, and even Harbaugh. Harbaugh was awesome. They won and won and won. They were 44-19-1 during the Harbaugh regime. They went to a Super Bowl, but he wore people out, and by the end of it, I think the players tuned him out. I think the front office, the ownership and the people in the organization were like, enough of this guy. So I personally think that I would definitely stay with Shanahan and Lynch going forward. But I'm not blindly tied to them by any stretch. And if they do regress, I would say, they've been at it for a number of years now. I would say I'd give them another 2 to 3 year window to see if they can land in the Super Bowl. If it doesn't happen in that window, yeah, at that point, I need to move on. But I'm not moving on February 2nd of 2023 because they lost the NFC Championship game and I'm butthurt. I'm not doing that.
Cool.
So,
all right, Larry, have a great show. Everybody
Digital
else
Drew,
in
good to see you.
the chat,
Anytime we're
like,
going
subscribe.
video calls, jump in, man. We always love to hear your perspective.
Cool, man.
Have a good one. Digital Drew hanging in Chicago. All right, let's get to Daniel here in a second, but let's hit a couple of these super chats and catch up in the chat. Motivation Gaming makes a donation. Says Shanahan Lynch said 6-month recovery for Purdy. KMBR had the doc statement who did his assessment say that he absolutely needs Tommy John surgery and would need to be out all of next season. Well, let's see. KMBR had the doc statement who did his assessment. Okay. Well, I don't know. I mean, so are you telling me that KMBR and local radio stations have more up-to-date information on the 49ers starting quarterback than the 49ers head coach and their 49er general manager? That would be a pretty neat trick. I would say lean with the coach and the GM. Tavarius makes a donation. He says, Brock really durable. Lance has to stay healthy. BS answer by Lynch. Well, what was Lynch's? What answer are you referring to? That he was content with Purdy and Lance. That it was a coincidence. John said it was a coincidence. I mean, it would be one thing if it was the same kind of situation. I think Kyle Shanahan has to share some of the blame on the Lance injury. I don't think you run your quarterback up the middle. I said it at the time, and I'm going to stay with it. As far as this on Brock, Brock's not an injury-prone guy. Brock's durable. Brock just took a bad hit to his throwing arm, and he's out. So I guess I don't want to jump in with the yes, the 49ers are doing something that is getting their quarterbacks hurt, and they need to be held accountable by 49er content creators who know more. I'm not seeing that. If I believed it, I'd be there, but I don't believe that. Glass City says Willard and Dibbs shot down that report. I don't believe it. Yeah, I'm not sure what to believe. I'm not sure what to believe. These reports, I mean, you definitely aren't believing the doctor who went on with Dan Patrick. That's a doctor that's probably never even seen the elbow. And then Shanahan kind of pointed out, and it's true, or Lynch pointed out, that once you get in there as a surgeon and see the elbow, what you thought from the MRI imaging could be totally different scenario than what you see when you get in and see that elbow, surgically when you pull the skin back. So, I think this is TBD, I think is all we're going to really have on the Brock Purdy elbow. But Shanahan did seem almost adamant that at least their public position is that Purdy will be back, Lance will be back, and they're going with the two young quarterbacks. So there you go. Crow says, who's the best choice to replace McGlinchey from the practice squad? Alfredo Gutierrez, Ishmael, Poe, or Watson? I've heard you say Poe, but he seems a bit short for the position. Well, definitely not Poe. Poe's a guard or a center. I think Poe's a center. As far as from the Niners roster, I probably out of that group would lean towards Watson, but not with any conviction. I'm just telling you from looking at his tape initially, he looked like the best prospect. But as far as what in-house, what are the Niners' best options? The Niners really like Nick Zakelj, and I do too. And Zakelj, I really think, has a great chance to be a starter at guard. Now, they have Spencer Burford, and Burford played right guard this year. Could they work on his footwork, get him a jump rope, work on his conditioning, kick him out to right tackle where he played at University of Texas at San Antonio his senior year? Possibly. Possibly. But, just watching Burford move, he's kind of built like a guard. He does have long arms like a tackle, but he carries a lot of weight in his thighs. He looks like a guard. He's got a body of a guard. So he'd have to really improve his technique. He'd have to be, spend an entire off season working on his kick out pass protection blocks. But he might be up to it. And Zakelj is physical and nasty, and he might be a good fit at right guard. And I think Burford in a pinch could play some right tackle, but he'd need to improve his quickness. As far as the list, before we go to the video calls here, I was looking at the list. It's not a good list. Okay. Here's the list of free agent offensive tackles, unrestricted free agent offensive tackles. Orlando Zeus Brown, coming off a bad year. George Fant, not that impressed. Good movement skills, though. Andre Dillard, Hasn't worked out in Philly. Liked him at Wazoo. High pick. Hasn't fulfilled his potential. Hasn't been able to get on the field. That's kind of an interesting one. Cam Irving, loved him at Florida State. He's kind of interesting. Riley Reef, no. Eric Fisher, if he's healthy. Isaiah Wynn, that's interesting. He also doesn't have a right tackle body. He's more of an interior lineman body. Brunskill's also a free agent. He can play virtually anywhere, but just in a pinch. Juwan James, no. Jason Peters, sounds like he's going back to Dallas. He's ancient. Kelvin Beachum, or no. Brandon Parker, no. Chris Hubbard, no. I mean, Caleb McGarry is not on that list, so I don't know if they re-signed him, but he's a guy that I would have interest in, or they may have to find somebody in the draft. And that means really doing an incredible job because they don't have a first or a second round pick, and almost all the tackles go in the first couple rounds. Larry Radnich says Niners are turning into the playoff sharks of old. Well, what's that? Hey, they're good enough to be good in the regular season. They're good enough to make it to the playoffs, and they're just bad enough to never be able to win a title. All right, let's go to Daniel and add him to the stream. Daniel, good afternoon. How are you?
Doing good. How you doing today, Larry?
Hey, I'm doing fantastic. What's on your mind, man?
Hey, man, just wanted to first off say thank you for the incredible interview last week with Steve. And then
you like Steve Young, huh? He wasn't that good?
That
70 minutes.
It was great. It's like it's so rare to get, extended amount of time from Steve anywhere, let alone just ESPN on a Monday night. So having that one-on-one and especially, digging in on the Niners, it was good old, got 10-year-old vibes, some little Daniel from back in the day, Steve Young winning the Super Bowl against San Diego. So that was always nice.
Yeah.
So
how old were you in 1994, Daniel?
I was 9. No, when they won the Super Bowl, I was 8. I wasn't even 9 yet. So yeah.
Yeah.
I remember.
It's funny. Exactly it takes us all back. It takes us all back. I'll say this for people who didn't see Steve Young, and it was, as I said, like 72 minutes long. So it is long. It is long. If you go to my YouTube channel, The Krueger Show, we've cut it into some smaller parts so you can kind of digest it in smaller parts. But my favorite answer there was when he talked about Brock Purdy. And this is a guy who really knows the quarterback position. And what stood out to him about Brock was that he's like, in a chaotic NFL world where a lot of quarterbacks are just all over the place, that Brock has this calm that he just exudes confidence and calm while there's this chaos going on around him. And I thought that was really interesting coming from Steve, because that is a rare trait. And I think he was right to kind of highlight that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for Brock, like the thing that amazed me was I was at the Dolphins. So I live in Vegas now, but originally I'm from San Jose. So I try to go out back home every 3 to 4 times a year and try to make a Niner trip out of it on those weekends. Right. So I was at the game when Jimmy went down and Brock came in. And I remember leaving that day and I was like, well, there goes our season. Like we're down to our 3rd string rookie quarterback. Like, he came in and he looked good during the game. And also it's like a different perspective watching the game in the stadium where you're not able to see exactly the nuances of every play, right? Replays. Yeah. So just leaving that day, I was just like, okay, rookies never won a Super Bowl. We have a good team, but this is probably it for us. And then being able to see his weekly improvement from, that December 3rd date to all the way up until this past weekend, it was like, oh, this is a rookie with a veteran mind, a veteran presence. He's just, even on the Thursday night game when he was telling George to shut up during the post-game interview, like he's a mature, 22-year-old kid. So it was just amazing to see like, okay, this kid is wise beyond his years. So it's like, while he's still processing the speed and everything that comes with the NFL, his mindset, where he's at as far as, seeing, not necessarily just seeing the field, but having the presence of mind that, I'm going to play within my game and I'm not going to, I don't know. I don't know if it was a scheme thing with Kyle or a combination of, Brock being a starter for 4 years in college, but it just meshed well together all around. But to get to the point I was wanted to call in about, one of the two things. One thing from today's presser that I really got out of it is, it looks like John Lynch wants to win. Like, John Lynch is like in it for the right reasons. He wants to do what it takes to win a Super Bowl. And like, even going back to last year when he could have left for Amazon for a whole lot more money and probably a whole lot less hours working a week, you can see that for Lynch, it's about he wants that
the ring.
Yeah, so I appreciate that about Lynch. The one thing that frustrated me today was, Kyle did mention how all the quarterbacks got injured differently, but it's also like the play calling, right? It's the way he draws up plays. It's they mentioned, oh, some quarterbacks are durable and never get hurt. Something I thought about is Tom Brady. Does Tom Brady releases the ball quick? Is that because of scheme, play calling? Kyle's plays could take a little bit longer to develop. And if you don't have that top O line to hold up for that extra second or 2 seconds, you're going to put your quarterbacks in a position to get injured. So I think it was like, I felt he sort of had a cop-out answer about the quarterbacks getting hurt. And I thought Grant asked a great question about, like, this seems like something that's a regular occurrence here with, and is it a luck thing or is it something you guys need to evaluate? Because I think, it's not a luck thing if it happens year in, year out. We could say, oh, Jimmy G was injury prone, but now we've seen Trey get hurt.
But the only thing is, I would say, is that this quarterback issue that the Niners have had with quarterbacks getting hurt predates Kyle. I mean,
right.
It wasn't Caps last year. Didn't he play like half the games and Gabbard played half the games? I mean,
wasn't
quarterbacks. I mean, some quarterbacks never get hurt. It could have something to do with the play action game. It could have something to do with the bootleg game. Those are staples of Kyle's offense. But it's like, I mean, the Trey Lance one bothered me. Why? Right. Because you ran Trey between the tackles, and I would never want to run between the tackles. I just think that's where quarterbacks, I mean, you're just not going to live between the tackles. There's too many badass guys who play on defense in the NFL. There's too many really big, heavy bodies in there. You're not living between the tackles as a runner, as a NFL quarterback. You're not living very long. So I do blame Kyle for the Lynch or for the Lance injury. I didn't think you needed to put the quarterback in harm's way. The people at the time who wanted to defend Kyle were like, well, the quarterbacks run all the time. It's like, yeah, but do they run between the tackles? And let's really look at the quarterbacks who do run. Where was Baltimore's Lamar Jackson at the end of the year? He was hurt. Exactly. I mean, the Eagles are really, really fortunate that Travis Gibson landing on Jalen Hurts' right shoulder didn't cause a full-blown separation. If it did, he wouldn't have been back for the NFC Championship game. So, I mean, Fields has got unbelievable size and speed. He's 6'2", 220. He runs 4.4. He suffered some injuries this year because he ran a lot. When you run in the NFL, running backs get hurt. I mean, we could talk about quarterbacks, but why not just say it? It's people who run with the football get hurt.
Right.
I mean, look at the Niner running backs. I mean, the Niner running backs have gone down, but is it something that Kyle does that puts his running backs in harm's way? No, it's that he runs his running backs and he likes speedy running backs. And so speedy running backs are usually not 220 to 240. They're more like 195 to 205 or 210. And they're fast. They get to the edges. They're great outside zone runners. But when you're 195, you get hurt.
Right.
I mean, to me, it's not about the quarterbacks getting hurt. It's about guys who run with the football get hurt. So maybe have your quarterback run with the football a little less. But as far as negligence would be if you had street free agents at tackles. You have the best left tackle in the game. You have a first-round draft choice who was a top 10 pick at right tackle in McGlinchey. You have legitimate blue-chip tackles, Okay. And then Banks was a second round pick. Burford is a nice player. So the only guy on that offensive line that you could say, what, you're going with that guy, is Brendel. And
Right.
Brendel was a Pro Bowl alternate at center. So I personally think they need to upgrade their offensive line, but it's not negligence.
Right.
Trent Williams is good enough. McGlinchey might need to be upgraded, but McGlinchey was a top 10 pick. It's not like they're sitting there saying, we got nothing, and you're just taking quarterbacks are just getting, your tackles are turnstiles and quarterbacks are going down left and right. The Josh Johnson one, okay, he took a hit, he landed, helmet hit the back, he's concussed. Okay. To me, that's different than the Purdy injury. The Jimmy injury was Jimmy, probably should have thrown the ball away. He's being tackled instead of going down. He's fighting for more yards. You're
Right.
a quarterback. When you're being tackled, go down. Don't fight for more yards. Go down. I felt like Jimmy had a big hand as much as Jimmy had a bigger hand in Jimmy's injury than Kyle had.
Right.
I think. And I don't blame Kyle for Purdy. I don't blame Kyle for Garoppolo. I do blame Kyle for Lance.
Got it. Yeah. And
That's
I
where
think,
I'm at. I mean, I don't know how you kind of differentiate that, but that's how I look at it. It's easy to go, it's all on Kyle and look at all these quarterbacks and they're all hurt. But Lynch said it, and I agree with him. It's not something that they're doing or something that they, are doing that they shouldn't do, or putting their quarterbacks in harm's way, or negligence by not surrounding them with good enough talent. I mean, this Eagles defensive line is ferocious. They had 70 sacks. 70. That's a ton.
that is
So you just have to, sometimes you got to tip your cap to the opposition. That they put all their money on defense, and they had an incredible defensive line. The Niners put a lot of money at defensive tackle because they kept missing on guys, maybe to the detriment of their O-line a little bit. And you could argue it burned them, but let's not pretend that they're doing something and it's gross negligence and it's all on Kyle. And if Kyle just made one different decision, everybody would be healthy. It's not anywhere close to that simple.
right. And I agree. I think my point of Tom Brady is like, even going back to like some of the Jimmy Garoppolo injuries that could have been avoided. Like those are plays that Brady would have got out of, right? He wouldn't have taken those necessary hits and taken those injuries per se. Where I feel like, I see the upside with Brock is I feel like, he could move in a little bit better a whole lot better in the pocket than Jimmy ever could. And two, it seems like he has that ability to like make better decisions or, throw the ball away, where sometimes Jimmy would throw a ball up for like, all right, hopefully this doesn't get picked. And maybe if I get lucky, one of my guys comes down with it. I feel like I'm hoping, Brock comes back, looks better than ever, or at least back to where he was at. And, while I was always a Trey guy, right? And then when Trey went down and Jimmy went down, it was like, oh shoot, we got something here in Brock. I think what I appreciate about Brock is you could just see the decision making, like he's a quick processor. I feel like that's important to, avoid these big hits, avoid, like the Hassan Riddick, hit was unfortunate. And that one, yeah, you're right. Maybe not put that on Kyle. And I'm not going to be one of those ones who's going to put it on Croft, or especially since that's a regular play in the system, right? So what I like the most is that if Brock can come back healthy and Brock does become the long-term starter, that ability to make quicker, better decisions will hopefully prevent us from having, regular sustained injuries at the quarterback position in the upcoming future.
Yeah. No, I mean, we'll see where it goes. It's going to be an interesting offseason. Brock's going to try to get healthy. Trey's going to try to get the reps that he needs. And, and we'll see them battle it out in camp. As far as other quarterbacks, let me just say this. I was looking at the list of quarterbacks who are free agents. Well, the Aaron Rodgers one is so interesting just because he's Aaron Rodgers, but it doesn't sound like they're going in that direction. Also, why is Green Bay trading him to the Niners? I don't see that. And then what draft picks do the Niners really have to trade to Green Bay? So and then he's going to blow up their cap for the foreseeable future. So even though the Rodgers thing, there's a lot of sentimentality about bringing the local kid home and this and that. And I'm sure Rodgers would love to try to take a shot at winning the Super Bowl under Shanahan with this great defense. But I just wonder, if they could make that deal. Do they have the compensation to offer Green Bay? Do they have the cap room to satisfy Rodgers? I wouldn't blow up. What would the team look like? And Rodgers doesn't seem like the kind of guy who would take any less to play. So I think he's going to want big, big money. I just don't think Rodgers works. I'm looking at the other guys. Gardner Minshew does nothing for me.
Right.
Sam Darnold, not a fan. Daniel Jones, I think he's going back to New York. Garoppolo, I think that ship sailed. So it really comes down to a couple names that I think are viable. One would be the Red Rifle, Andy Dalton. I could see them going for Andy Dalton. I really believe the Niners were one of the teams that Andy Dalton considered going to before he went to Chicago, I think. So Dalton would make sense. If you had Dalton and Lance and Purdy, to me, that makes sense. The other name, and this is an interesting one, Easton Stick. Easton Stick was at North Dakota State with Trey. And if you're really trying, and I think the Niners, since they invested so much in Trey, they really have to go and see if they can surround Trey with as much complementary type pieces so that he can maybe fulfill his potential. And Easton Stick and Trey have a relationship. They're friends. He knows Easton. Easton knows him. It's always good to have a guy in the room that you really trust and believe in. Stick's got some movement ability. He's not going to cost you anything. You can get him for virtually nothing. He'd be a significant upgrade on Josh Johnson or most third quarterbacks. So that would be the name. Andy Dalton, I think, would be the name that everybody knows. Easton Stick would be the name that everybody doesn't know. I think they'll look at both those. Those are the two guys I think they'll look at as the third quarterback.
If let's say Brock, it comes out, he's going to need the full season and he'll be out.
That's possible too. I mean,
to you, would it make more sense to bring in a Jacoby Brissett type over even like an Andy Dalton? Because I feel like while Andy Dalton is a proven veteran, I feel like if, season-ending injury were to happen to Trey Lance, let's say, I feel like Jacoby is more built for taking on, multiple half a season, 10 games, 12 games than I'd want Andy Dalton necessarily playing.
Maybe it's just, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I put those guys in kind of a similar bucket. I think they're very similar. So if they said they wanted to have Jacoby Brissett instead of Andy Dalton, I'm not fighting anybody over that. You know what I mean? I think they're kind of similar. I think they're kind of the same guy. That's kind of, that's how I see Brissett. I don't see him as a huge upgrade over Dalton, but I don't see Dalton as a huge upgrade over him. So, somebody like that, though. So a cheap veteran who you could make. I mean, you might have to start week 1 with this player. You might have to play a month with this player.
Right.
Do you feel more comfortable going with Andy Dalton or Jacoby Brissett? I don't know. I would probably lean towards Dalton, but over Brissett, but I don't know. I haven't studied Brissett that much, and if they were hot to trot on Brissett, I could be sold on that.
Right. And then the only other person that comes to mind, but I'm not sure if he signed a 2-year deal this offseason, was Tyrod Taylor.
I think he did sign a 2-year deal.
It was 2 years.
He did, because he's not listed on the free agent. He's not. Let me see. I don't think he's listed on the free agent. If on the free agent list here, let me see if he's on here. I mean, there's also the draft. We don't really talk about the draft that much, but I mean, there's always yes, Trey's young, yes, Brock's young, but I mean, looking at the future of the NFL, it's pretty clear that, that you need to have quarterbacks. You need to have young quarterbacks, and I think it's a good quarterback class, to be honest. I mean, obviously, the top 3 guys, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Will Levis, all first-round picks. Anthony Richardson from Florida, probably also a first-round pick. But I love Anthony Richardson. My God, He's 6'3", he's 235, he's incredible athlete, runs well. I mean, man, if he was on the board, I'd be interested in him. Don't discount Tanner McKee from Stanford, who Tanner McKee's a really interesting guy. He's 6'6", he's 225. I believe he was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. He's really, really accurate. And he's got size, as I said, 6'6". So that's an interesting one. Jaron Hall from BYU is interesting. Jake Hayner from Fresno State, small, kind of like Brock Purdy, but he obviously was great at Fresno State. Max Duggan from TCU, pretty athletic player. I know some people like the UCLA kid, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He's super athletic, and at times you catch him on the right day, he looks awesome. I kind of like Adrian Martinez from K-State. I just watched the College All-Star game last night, and Malik Cunningham from Louisville, interesting player. I mean, 6'1", 200 pounds, really good arm. There's a kid from Fordham, Tim DeMorat, who's an interesting player. Lindsey Scott, who's been at like 5 different schools. He played this year for Incarnate Word, is a really interesting player. So there's a bunch of, I'll say this, there's a bunch of guys in this draft, and the Niners don't have a first-round pick, but they have 3 picks in the 3rd round. So maybe you can find one of those guys. And I think, if you said what are the needs, got to get an offensive tackle, got to get a defensive tackle, got to get another corner who can cover, got to get a safety who can cover, especially if Jimmy Ward's not coming back. But offensively, I kind of like what they have. They need you could argue for a quarterback, being an option. But I would say, if I'm looking at this from just the veteran route, Andy Dalton is the guy that people know that I think they would have interest in. Easton Stick is the guy that people don't really think of. Daniel, I'll let you jump, brother, but have a good day in Vegas. Thanks for jumping in. And anytime we're going video calls, man, jump in. We'd love to hear from you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Larry. Have a great one.
You too, Daniel. Appreciate it. A lot of people saying Lamar Jackson. I love Lamar. Oh, did Bobby Beathard die today? Am I reading that? MF? I met Bobby Beathard. My buddy was a San Diego Charger. The great Kevin Hull was a San Diego Charger football operations assistant when I was in college. And we went to spring break. We went down to San Diego for a few days and went to spring training and met with Bobby Beathard and his pro personnel director, Rudy Feldman, in the Chargers offices, and then even went out to the beach and watched Bobby go surf. I didn't surf, but he went out there and actually surfed. Bobby Beathard was really cool. I mean, really cool. This guy was an NFL general manager, and a fucking great one, with the Washington Redskins and then the San Diego Chargers. He hired Bobby Ross. He built the Chargers into that team that went to the Super Bowl against the 94 Niners. So they, of course, lost. But Natron Means Business, Stan Humphries, Junior Seau. That's Bobby Beathard, baby. That was all Bobby Beathard. And Bobby was super kind to me and was very encouraging about my personnel evaluation career, and helped me connect with a couple NFL people. I love Bobby Beathard, man. I'm very sad to hear that. And I didn't even know that he was on his deathbed, but oh my God. R.I.P. Bobby Beathard, man. Great, great, great man. And he was such a chill dude. So we're sitting there in his office. He's wearing board shorts and a t-shirt and flip-flops. And he's like, "Hey man, let's go out to PB. I want to do some surfing." And literally in his office at the stadium there, wherever, Mission Valley, I think, where the Murph used to be, and the Chargers had their offices there. He had a surfboard. He's got all these, you look at his board, he's got all these guys on all the defensive tackles, all the defensive ends. I went and saw him in March. The draft was April. So he had all of his draft board up. He let us come in, look at his draft board, and right next to his draft board, 2 gigantic surfboards. And I'm like, "Oh, these are cool, man. What do you do with them?" He's like, "I surf." I'm like, what a stupid fucking question, Larry. What do you do with them? "I surf." And he surfed, and he was just really cool, really, really cool, really, really smart. I think was it the grandfather of CJ Beathard, I believe? Bobby Beathard, really, really a good dude. All right, let me get one super chat and we'll hit back to the lines here. Adam says, assuming Brock comes back as a starter in week 1, how hard is it for Trey to still learn and get better without taking reps as the starter? I think Brock is awesome for Trey because look what Brock does. Brock's got the nuances of the position down, and Trey's got this unbelievable skill set, but he needs to play and get those nuances down. And watching Brock, I bet you if you interviewed Trey right now and said, hey, have you learned a lot this year watching Jimmy and Brock? He would say, oh my God, I've learned huge amounts. So I can't wait to see Trey get back on the field because I know football's important to Trey. So it's not like Trey's just messing around. Trey's watching these guys. And when he gets back on the field in OTAs, I think you're going to see a more developed player than the player that we saw, on the field at the beginning of this year. All right, let's hit the chat here. Do we have Jeremy? Jeremy, are you there, bud?
Yeah, Larry. Hey, how's it going,
how you
man?
doing, man? Appreciate
good.
you.
Good.
How's your day going, man?
It's good, man. Just settling back in the Bay Area, man. I moved back from Houston.
Nice.
Yeah, you're
gotta get out of
the
the sweat box.
Yeah, no, my family's still over there. I just came back for school for SF State. Started.
There you go.
Started
Good
my
school.
first
What are you
semester.
studying?
I'm studying communications.
Good.
And I'm a minor in journalism. I kind of like this field.
Yeah. There you go. I was a communications major myself.
Yeah. I kind of want to start getting into it, and but yeah, man, just sports, man. This last year has been terrible, just in general. With the Giants, well, I guess the Warriors were good, but
yeah,
with the Giants,
the Warriors had a parade,
yeah, but me and my brother, we saw, I want to say, about 120 games of the Giants, man. I think the most heartbreaking one was when Bellinger hit the grand slam. That was just backbreaking because I feel like that game started the downside of the Giants in a way after the All-Star break.
Yeah, the Giants,
yeah.
The Giants just fell apart in the second half. To me, it fell apart. I lost faith in Farhan when he started talking about Soto and then he traded for JD Davis. I was like, dude, you're talking Soto. I mean, you got to under promise and over deliver. He doesn't get it. Farhan's a genius guy that doesn't even understand basic sales, which is under promise, over deliver, not the opposite. If you promise huge and deliver a little, people hate you. If you promise nothing and deliver a little, they love you. Learn sales, under promise, over deliver. And when he learns that, man, he's going to be a whole lot better. He's going to have a whole lot more fans than he has right now. Right now, people are like, Farhan, come on, man. Seriously,
it's the same. I would say in Boston.
Starts.
I would say it's the same in Boston. Like I would say, us in Boston, we're kind of like on that same boat in terms of the type of dudes are running the organization. All these analytical dudes, like you said, that lack that
Kime Bloom or whatever is
that like trading Mookie.
I like Farhan. I think he's smart, but he obviously doesn't know sales. He should go do commission sales for a little bit and then come back.
But to touch on the Niners, Larry, what I've seen a lot, especially with this Trey thing and how it divided the fan base with Trey and Jimmy now, I can imagine it's probably going to divide the fan base between Trey and Brock now. But what this
which
Trey
is unfortunate because they're both.
Yeah.
There's no reason you don't have to be a Trey guy or a Brock guy. I consider myself both. I love Trey in the draft. I wanted Trey in the draft, but I've then seen what Brock's done, and I love what I watching Brock. And I'm really confident they're both going to be good. But I think Brock's already good and needs to get healthy, and I think Trey just needs to develop. But eventually, he's going to develop, and when he does, he's going to be good. So I think the Niners, in some ways, are sitting in a good position. But go ahead.
But I feel like I honestly feel like Trey is a good 2-3 years away. I see a lot of like Josh Allen in him. I tell you what, I went to go see him in Houston. I saw Trey's first snaps in the preseason. I saw his first snaps, and to be quite honest with you, I work at the bank in Houston, and I came across the linebacker Jonathan Owens from the Houston Texans. I believe he's dating Simone Biles, or is his fiance.
Okay.
And we're just talking about catching up about that game and everything.
About the Texans game that Trey started?
Yeah, and I kid you not, he told me it was harder to defend Brock Purdy than it was Trey Lance. he said that Trey Lance's game was a little one dimensional, and that the Texans adjusted to him. And you can kind of see it in the play during the preseason game. And my dad's not really he's into
Oh, you're
sports.
talking about the preseason. You're not talking about last year. You're talking about this one in
No,
Houston.
yeah, yeah. They said they
Gotcha,
were
gotcha.
that the whole team they weren't really. I wouldn't say they weren't really afraid of Trey Lance to like. And he was like, I think you guys were better off with Jimmy. That's what he told me.
Yeah.
And this is coming from like a guy at that level, at that pro level,
Right. Who has no agenda.
Yeah. Like, why would he tell me this? Like,
Right.
and then I was just,
And it's
you
not
can kinda see
surprising.
it,
I mean,
yeah.
why would Trey Lance, after 1 year of college, be more advanced than Garoppolo? You know what I mean?
Right.
If he did, I'd be shocked. If he
Right.
was, we would be like, wow, that's incredible. But so I understand that. But that also doesn't mean that Trey, with more development, more seasoning, more learning, can't improve by leaps and bounds. When you haven't played a lot, that also impacts your learning curve. Or I think I would much rather take a chance on a guy like Trey, who's got traits but hasn't played a lot, than a guy who's played a lot and hasn't been very good but has traits. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like we have to see the growth, but then we have to see the improvement. I feel great about Trey because the thing is, I know some of the road scouts who have been to Fargo and have met with him and know his family and know some of the coaches on the North Dakota State staff, and they swear by him to a
Right.
man. I've talked to 25 different people in the last, leading in the draft, leading into his draft year, and since, who know him, who have been there, who have seen him, and they say, you know what, great kid. Gonna
Right.
work hard, gonna improve. Not there yet, but it's coming. And I agree. That's what I would say too. It's not
But
there yet, but he's coming.
but at the same time, though,
May
and
take a
I
while
agree.
though.
Yeah, I agree with all your takes, Larry. But I just feel like the Niners really they should have really realized the situation they were in. They have all these good players. Kittle's in his prime. Debo's in his prime.
Yeah. You
McCaffrey's
can't
in his
waste those
prime.
guys'
Yeah,
prime.
and you can't, like you said,
Yeah.
I saw that episode where you're like, a lot of these people that love Trey, and you're like, and I love Trey. You said this is not the San Francisco Trey Lancers, like they're not gonna, stop everyone's growth or stop everyone's ability just to see Trey Lance like get better. So that's why I
Yeah.
think in a lot of ways, like, I just think they really like, I just didn't know mortgaging your future for somebody who you don't even know is going to work out. Like you said, like Trey has all these qualities, has all this potential, but you don't know if he's going to live up to it. And I just think that the Niners with those draft picks, and this was probably naive of my part, but I just think they should have gone with Rodgers then, because there's even back then when Trey was drafted, there's a lot of speculation of, oh, it's Rodgers is unhappy. Like it's been going on for so many years. And
It's tough though, because
Yeah.
here's the thing. We're now in an era where the older quarterbacks are being phased out and it's a young man's league. Look at the quarterbacks in the playoffs. They were all relatively young for the most part. And it's a young man's game. And it's just like the father time keeps churning forward. And I think the 49ers had their right intentions when they drafted Trey. I think they said, hey, we'll take a kid that we think has the best traits, and then we'll put him in what we think is the best process. And then because we get the best quarterback traits and the best process, and it was all very logical, that we'll have a franchise quarterback. But that's just not always the way it goes. Sometimes players, just because they have traits and you've got a great process, doesn't mean that they're going to evolve into the next Mahomes. So
Right.
I don't know. We'll see. The one thing is, we've only got glimpses of Trey, a glimpse here, a glimpse there. There were days in camp where he looked awesome.
Right.
I mean, really, really, really
Right.
good. Where he's hitting guys down the middle, 30, 40 yards down the field.
And he has the long ball too.
I saw him drop a pass on Jordan Matthews on a down the middle ball. It wasn't quite a post. It was more like a go pattern. And he hit him in stride. And it was like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, it was like, there aren't too many quarterbacks that can make that throw. But then there were lots of times in camp where he was winding up holding the ball at the end of the drill. So he just needs reps, development, And I wish the NFL had no rules about off-season hours and had no limitations to how much time you could spend at the facility, because he needs to live at the facility, immerse himself in every aspect of the Niner offense, and get with his receivers and get those reps in the offseason so that when he hits camp, he's got it down. He's got everything down. I mean, I'm sure he's got the offense down probably by now, but I mean, you know, we gotta see a little bit better, more consistent player than what we saw this summer.
Yeah, I just feel like the season he should have started was that first season right after the draft. And I mean, that's what I was thinking, because if you remember the year before the Niners, they weren't really all that great because all these injuries. And then
Yeah.
there's that speculation. They're like, are the Niners going to even be good? You know? And then the whole season played out where he was riding the bench. He started like those 2 or 3 games against Arizona and against Houston. And you were just like saying to yourself, you're like, man, how come he's not starting? And a lot of the fans, they wanted him to start. I think that was a season that the Niners should have just gone straight with Trey.
It's so hard because you got
Yeah,
other guys in the room, and it's like, how do you look at a Trent Williams and say, yeah, Trent, I know you're in your mid-30s. I know this could be your last season, but we're about developing a really raw young quarterback. You know, that
right.
may not play well with some of the veterans. So that's the other balancing act here. I mean, you can't lose the team to develop the quarterback. And if the
Exactly.
team doesn't believe in the quarterback, then, and I'm not saying they don't, but I'm just saying, if the quarterback's timeline is he's going to be good in 3 years, what about the guys who aren't going to be here in 3 years? How are they going to respond to that? Hey,
Right.
Jeremy, let me jump because I appreciate you, but I've got a couple more in here. I should go to motivation here, but I don't see him there. Motivation, are you there? There we
Hey,
go.
what's going on, Larry?
Hey, motivation, how are you?
I'm doing well. My name's Mo, but I was on here like last week, I believe. Shortly, we talked about Commodore and Boy Scouts and everything like that. I'm not sure if you remember that
There you go,
conversation.
Commodore Sloat, yeah.
Yeah. I just kind of want to, I've been listening to the broadcast today, and I actually put that comment in about the about KMBR this morning, about them about the doctor and
Right.
everything like that. And I think I just caught the last half of it. But I
Was
think
it
it
the
might just be
same doctor that was on with Patrick?
that's
Or
what
was
I
it Purdy's
thought.
doctor?
I might have misheard what they were saying, but what they were trying to say was it looks like it's a complete tear, and they could be out the whole entire season, the entire next season, and it really, like, I was like, please don't let this be true, because I'm a huge Purdy fan. I really am. I think we found a gem. I really do. It's just, he doesn't have the physical prowess in terms of the weight and the height and everything like that to take hits. But but just watching him play, and his story was just amazing all year. It really brought a lot of motivation
He's got a tremendous feel.
Yeah, he
He's got
does.
a tremendous feel
He
for the
does. He
position.
really does. But when you were talking about quarterbacks, another quarterback that because I kind of took a look at the free agents this morning and was looking at
Yeah,
who's
what do you think of the
available.
list?
Yeah, and Terry Bridgewater's available too, and he might be a possible
Teddy, yep.
Band-Aid. He's a little bit of an older quarterback. He's been, I mean, not older, but he's been in the league for a little while. He has a little bit of mobility. He could throw the ball pretty well. He does have some concussion issues. I know that was an issue
That's
too.
a
He had a few
concern, yeah.
concussions here and there. There's also Joe Flacco, who's available. He's older too, yeah. And then Taylor Heineke is available too, which from the Commanders. He didn't look too
That's
bad.
actually interesting too. That's an interesting name too.
So and
I'll
I know
give
you
that one.
mentioned.
I like that one. I like Heineke because he can move a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think you got to have some movement ability. If you're going to stay with one system, right? You got Trey, you got Brock. They both move exceptionally well. I would imagine the third guy you bring in's got to have some movement ability too. Otherwise,
Exactly. I don't think a pocket passer would work. I really don't for RPOs and stuff like that. I really don't think I was big. I was, when they mentioned Brady, I was like, that might be a good fit, things like that. But he's just, and he could definitely take the hits, but he's just, he's on his last legs. And I can't say I was happy that he's retiring, definitely for him and everything like that. But I was also kind of happy that it took that option off the table. You know what I mean? For
Well,
us
I'm glad
here.
that he did it decisively today, so we don't have,
Yes.
because I mean, there were people that were going to town yesterday on Brady. I like the idea of Brady. Heck, I was going to town about it. To me, it lined up perfectly, especially because he was a free agent. He wanted to be here. But you know what? Good for Tom. You don't
Yeah.
want to be carted off.
Yeah.
That let's be honest. There's an awful lot of great players who had to be carted off. And to me, I wouldn't want to see that for him. He's meant too much to the league. He means too much to football fans everywhere to see him, go out carted off. So, you know what?
I
Walk
agree.
off. And this year, did he play great? No, but he had 25 touchdowns and 9 picks. It wasn't like he was, 13 touchdowns and 22 picks or something like that. But he definitely had regressed. He definitely had regressed.
Yeah, and I really like the aspect of him kind of being the mentor for Trey and for Purdy as well. So that would have been great to have him there as kind of a mentor for them, to learn the professional football, just kind of getting tips and tricks and things like that. That they I call them like golden nuggets for them for their future. And I don't think there's like really. To learn from the GOAT. That, you know what I mean? That would have been. I honestly, he's not my GOAT. Montana's my GOAT, but just one of the GOATs. You know what I mean? And that was a big part of the reason why I really wanted him to come as well. But
did you see? By the way, Francesa today? Mike Francesa was on ESPN with Russo and Stephen A. And he said that Peyton Manning is the best regular season quarterback, that Montana was the best Super Bowl quarterback, but that Brady's longevity makes him, in a category all his own. I would say, you know what? If you want to give Joe his flowers for being perfect in the Super Bowl and put him in front of Tom, that's fine. But in no way should Peyton Manning ever be in front of Tom Brady. Come on. Seriously, how many didn't Tom Brady beat Peyton Manning almost every single time head to head? I mean, come on.
Pretty much.
I'll put Brady in front of Peyton Manning and feel very confident in doing so.
Yeah, I definitely too. I mean, that's kind of like the longevity thing with LeBron and with Jordan. That whole, LeBron should be the GOAT because of the longevity, and then
I ain't
they
going
talk
there
about.
Either. I'll
Yeah,
take Jordan.
no, I'm an MJ for like diehard. Diehard MJ fan. He's definitely the GOAT. But I don't want to talk about basketball too much. But the whole thing too with Aaron Rodgers, I think everyone should just close that book. I don't think it's going to happen. I really don't. We don't have the cap space. We don't have,
the Niners
the
have
capital.
$5.9 million currently in cap space. He would require a huge investment. I mean, they would to get Aaron Rodgers. You'd need to clear $50 million. I mean, it's just, you know what I mean? You're not doing it. It's not happening. And Green Bay's not doing it.
They definitely would not
Green
do
Bay
that.
Thinks of themselves as a Super Bowl contender, even though I don't think they are, but they think of themselves that way. I think they want to trade him, but they want to trade him to the AFC and they want picks. They want 2 number ones. Niners don't have the 2 number ones.
We're their arch rivals. We beat them, they're
not trading.
Twice in the playoffs. They do not like us right now. So, I mean, if I was Green Bay, I wouldn't do it either, honestly. But it is what it is. But I just wanted to tell you, thank you. I'm on my lunch. I got to get back to work. But I just wanted to tell you, thanks for having me on. I love watching you. I turn you on when I'm working and things like that. Just kind of have you in the background, and I love your insight on things. And
awesome,
go Niners.
Man. And hey, join me again today at I think at 3 o'clock, maybe 4 o'clock. I got to see exactly what time. I'm doing another live stream today with Brad Graham. Are you familiar with Brad Graham?
I'm not familiar
Brad's
with him.
really good. Yeah, 3 o'clock. So it's 2:20, roughly 2:20 now. So about 40 minutes from now, I'm jumping in on another live stream with Brad Graham, and we'll get his thoughts on a lot of these things. But Mo, have a great day. Have a great day at work. And anytime we're going live, man, jump in on us. We'd love to have you.
Thank you, Larry.
See you, Mo. There you go. The great Mo. Papa Dragon's in the house.
Papa,
sorry for making you wait so long, man. I know you've been in the room for a while, but I appreciate you. Where are you coming from?
Nashville, Tennessee.
There you go.
How you doing, baby?
Nice. I'm doing great. How are you?
Great. A lot of San Francisco people here.
I've been in Nashville. but it's been probably a decade.
Right.
But I'll say this, the downtown is so clean. I mean, it's just nice. I mean, it is downtown Nashville, and maybe it was just the bars that I was at or the area I was at. It just seemed like really, really, really clean. Is that have you ever heard that before? I mean, as far as I didn't see, I mean, I didn't, it was just everything looked almost new. I mean, it was really a pretty cool little downtown.
That's because it is. I think for the most part, a lot of the stuff here is probably around 20, 25 years old at the most. So, I mean, literally, even where I live now, apparently about 20 years ago, there was a dirt road that connected our small town. It was literally a dirt road.
Wow. Well, there's a lot of tech now there, right? Isn't it a big tech boom? I've been all throughout Tennessee. I've been Nashville. I've been in Memphis. I was saying the other day to some people after the Warrior game in Memphis, I was like, the most overrated, hey, you got to check this out.
Right.
Is Beale Street. I mean, I went down to Beale Street and had some drinks with some friends, and it was fine, but they were talking about it like it was like the French Quarter in New Orleans, and it wasn't.
No, it's very different just because like basically like 1 out of every 25 people here are basically foreigners or transplants from other states.
Oh, really?
So a lot of outside money has come in and pretty much just like built the place up. So the economy's booming, population's booming because a lot of people are moving here. So there's like a lot of adjustments, but overall, I think I visited here 5 times before we decided to go ahead and move and give it a try.
Where'd you come from? Were you living in San Francisco, the Bay Area, or?
No, I wasn't. I am a 49er fan by way of Lawrence Taylor. I used to play when I played defense. My coach said, "Look at LT," so I would look at LT, and then I came across San Francisco, and then of course that went from LT to Ronnie Lott, and then I went from Ronnie Lott, believe it or not, to Joe Montana.
Ronnie and LT were in the same draft class.
Yeah. So when I started,
LT was awesome, by the way. Any young fan,
yeah.
I know, everything today is better than everything yesterday, but LT was hard to explain. I mean, he had the strength of a defensive tackle. He had the speed of a defensive back.
No,
he had
absolutely.
the tenaciousness. I mean, I believe Joe Gibbs created the H-back as a way to better defend and block Lawrence Taylor.
Right. And you could arguably say that Mike Shanahan was kind of the architect for moving tight ends out wide and motioning them inside. He was one of the first people to do that. So we saw a lot of stuff happen before the 49ers won their last Super Bowl back in '94. A lot of things started then with the tight ends becoming like this huge weapon or kind of like a receiver that could block. We started seeing that from Shanahan, and we saw the beginning of the running quarterback that could actually win from the pocket in Steve Young. So a lot of stuff that we saw back then is like a lot more common today. And I can only imagine how many yards Jerry Rice would have today with today's rules where you couldn't hit Jerry.
Seriously.
Jerry would have 3,000 yards a season.
All those crossing patterns, he'd just be unstoppable.
Yeah, he used to get faster after 15 yards, so Jerry was definitely a freak of nature. But like the rules back then were so much different, then than they are today, where they are basically set up to kind of extend the passing offense. And as a result of that, you've seen defensive players become the best athletes on the field, not just in size, but in strength and tenacity. So, I mean, you figure that today they probably put out maybe 5 or 6 defensive linemen compared to a half of an offensive lineman. So big discrepancies overall, I think, right now, as far as like the athletic talent that you see on the defensive side of the field compared to the offensive side.
The athletes on defense now are incredible. I mean, if you're a 4'7" linebacker, you're literally moments away from being exposed in pass coverage.
Right.
Like all the Niner linebackers run 4'5".
Yeah.
The Niners had this guy Saguna Luby in camp this summer from San Diego State. He ran 4.48.
Yeah.
I mean, and he was 225 pounds. So
Yeah.
linebackers used to be like Matt Millen with the big old neck roll.
Right.
And now they look like like the super safety of the 80s. Joey Browner, David Fulcher, Jeff Fuller with the Niners, the big thumpers that were 235. Those guys are all backers now. They're all linebackers.
And I also think too, there's a big discrepancy between the overall warrior mentality of players from yesterday to today. Like back in the day on the 49ers, back in the 80s and 90s, we had about 7 to 10 to 15 Debos. All these guys had attitude and they were going to run through you, kind of a thing. And now we probably got a couple of those guys. I probably would say we got Debo, you got Kittle, who's like that. And I just think that the only limitations these guys have is just what their physical bodies can withstand, because the players today are faster and they're bigger than they were back in the day. And I think you ask any NFL team that plays the 49ers, they're going to be sore after a couple of weeks. Like, I expect the Eagles to lose.
I do too.
Just because I think they're going to be beat up.
Well, they get 2 weeks, and they didn't get the Niners A game. Let's be honest.
Well, they took a licking in the second half ultimately, and let me ask you a question, because I want to let's talk about the game for just a second, and then I want to talk to you a little bit about the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
In your opinion, who's the best tight end in the NFL?
Best tight end in the NFL?
Best tight end, in your opinion, today?
Kelsey.
Okay.
Just because he's so unstoppable. But I think with Purdy, Kittle's right there neck and neck with him.
Okay. Personally, I think physically.
I also love Waller.
Physically, I think Kittle's better. Okay. Because he can block, right? Now, you said Kelsey. Now, would you ever assign Kelsey to block Nick Bosa?
Not if I can avoid it.
That's what I'm talking about. And that's where I disagree with you. A quarterback is only going to be as good as his coach takes care of him. And I think sometimes what happens with Shanahan is what life is. I think that you could do 10,000 things right and do one thing wrong. And that one thing wrong gets you fired. Now, I'm not saying fire Shanahan. I'm not in that camp. What I'm just saying, in real life, that's typically what happens.
And if anybody is in that camp, can we all agree that they're idiots? Anybody who's really going to say dump Kyle Shanahan at this point, they've been to the NFC Championship game 3 times in 4 years.
Right. I'm not going to say that.
I'm just saying there are people saying that, though.
There are people saying that, but
yeah,
let's look at the history of the 49ers ownership. George Seifert got fired after a 12-4 season. Marty Schottenheimer
different time
after a 12-4 season. That's true.
The Niners had crazy standards back then.
Yeah, but that's understandable. But we fired Chip Kelly. We fired Tom Sula very quickly. We foolishly fired Jim Harbaugh, although you could arguably say that had to happen because Jim and Jed just weren't going to get along.
Jim's act had worn a little thin, I think, personally. But
probably.
I mean, he's still a great coach, but I think he had lost some of the room.
He is what I hope that Shanahan is not, and that is a high quality loser. You get only so far with them, but they don't get all the way. And I think that assigning a tight end or any tight end against one of the best pass rushers in the league, especially after what we saw Michael Parsons do to McGlinchey, a guy who's literally 6'3", 240 pounds, and he hip tossed McGlinchey.
Like Parsons had how many sacks in that game?
I don't know how many sacks he had, but the point is that if he would have got a hit onto the quarterback, it's going to hurt your quarterback.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? And it's the same thing. People will sit there and say, oh, well, Brady wouldn't survive behind this offensive line. There's a different dynamic when Brady comes to town as opposed to Purdy, who has no clout, no history. You know, you don't want to be the guy that, quote unquote, blows a block that injures Brady. But you'll survive in your career if it happens to Purdy. And we all know that Purdy, if you watch the film, sometimes Purdy throws the ball late or he doesn't throw it at all. And he's also favoring scrambling to the left because he's trying to get away from the leaky right side. So sometimes he used to he'll feel phantom pressure. So I like Purdy. I like him a lot. I drafted him in my fantasy draft.
Did you?
Yes, I did. I picked
in the draft.
The last 2 drafts, I have gotten 2 players right each draft.
Damn,
I'm dead serious. So I remember when
that's good, man. If you drafted Purdy in the fantasy draft,
I did 17.
I'll give you props for that.
I give you props because you pointed him out.
Well, but the thing is, I'm standing there watching him, and I've had some training from people who actually know what they're doing, who've shown me what to look for.
Right.
But I mean, I didn't like it on draft day. Like when they on draft day, when they said the 49ers have drafted Brock Purdy, I was like, really?
I love it.
I didn't like it at the time because I was like, you know what? These college quarterback, doesn't have NFL arm strength. Then I spent like a couple days like doing deep dives, and I started calling people I knew. And
yeah, go ahead.
And the more I started to see it, and then by mini camp I really saw it.
Yeah,
by training camp I definitely saw it. And to me, the final evaluation was the preseason. And once he looked like a pro in the preseason, I'm like, I don't care about Nate Sudfeld and his $2 million guarantee. I get Niner beat writers kept telling me, dude, Nate Sudfeld, $2 million guaranteed. I'm like, guess what? That doesn't mean jack.
It doesn't mean anything. No, it doesn't.
Shanahan indicated that.
No, not in today's NFL. I mean, it means that, okay, look, don't go look someplace else. That's what that means. We got you. Don't look.
But you saw Purdy on draft day as a fantasy option. I had him on my fantasy team too.
Oh, no, not fantasy. What I mean by that is that you do mock drafts. So I've been on a couple of shows where I would be invited as a guest as a mock drafter, right?
Gotcha.
So the first year I drafted Trey Lance, and I actually drafted Hufanga in the 3rd round in that draft, right? So
he was the defensive player of the year in the conference.
Yeah. Exactly why. When I watched this film, he just jumped off the tape. I didn't care how, and I don't care about 40-yard dash speed. I really don't.
I don't either, really, but sometimes you can get burned with that too. You do have to have some requisite speed.
Yep. Eagles drafted Mike Mamula in the 1st round. He was 6'7", 260 pounds. He ran a 4.40.
Right.
They drafted him in the 1st round. Bust. Patrick Mahomes runs a 4.8.
AJ Jenkins ran 4.31.
Yeah, exactly. So
Couldn't
it's like
catch a cold.
It's what can you is what do you look like with the pads are on the film is what makes all the difference in the world to me.
Yep.
I like Trey, but it wasn't because of. Let me put it this way: if I knew that they were going to use Trey, because my draft crush was Justin Fields, right? That's who I would have taken. But the minute they say, okay, we want you to do a mock draft for the 49ers for our show, I try to think like the 49ers, right? So when I looked at Trey Lance, I looked at the pro offense, the under the center. I looked at the fact that he was under snap more than anybody else in that draft class, under center.
Right.
I looked at the fact that when he was on the field, unlike the other quarterbacks, he never looked at the sideline for assistance or guidance or help.
He worked in a pro style scheme from under center.
Exactly.
Play action heavy game.
Exactly. Now, when he got in there and finally played against the Cardinals, and they ran him all those times and went for it on
16
4th down
runs.
I was like, what in the hell was going on?
I was too.
Right. So fast forward to today or this season, and I called it. I'm on a radio show. I was on Rambo's show, and I've talked to Grant Cohn a couple times, and I just flat out said, Trey is going to get hurt. Any quarterback that runs up the middle between the tackles is going to get hurt. And what I mean by hurt is that a lot of times it's this dinged up hurt. For example, Josh Allen right now is still in pain because they run him up the middle. Lamar Jackson.
It's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. That's not the quarterback position is made for, in my opinion. I don't care how big and how strong you are. Eventually, someone's going to land on you.
Fletcher Cox is bigger and stronger.
Yeah. And you don't even have to be bigger or stronger. Let's call it for what it is. Sometimes it's just what that dog is like inside the person that makes all the difference in the world. Like, I love Jimmy Ward because, holy smokes, he just turns his body into a weapon and comes at you.
He's awesome.
Right?
Love Jimmy Ward.
Yeah, I love Jimmy Ward. I'm gonna miss him.
I don't know if he's going away. We'll see.
Oh, I think
A lot of people say he is, but I don't.
Well,
I'll believe it when I see it, because I know they, his whole thing on IG, and I saw his whole thing, and
Yeah.
Shanahan, so he can come back as a backup or whatever. But I mean, he's still incredibly valuable.
Oh,
incredibly
he's
valuable.
super valuable. I hope he comes back. Not optimistic. Now, going back to the quarterbacks and going back to Shanahan, and that's why I believe that players like Dante Whitner, Jerry Rice feel that Shanahan is culpable for some of these decisions. Because again, what did he risk by running that play with a backup tight end who wasn't even active the first week against their best pass rusher? Now, again, as a head coach, you have to take into account everything. And what you see on the chalkboard is one thing, but what happens on the grass, what happens on the dirt is different. It is completely different. So Purdy was late, which is, again, it happens with him like 40% of the time. He's late on the throw. You don't think Reddick knew that? When he watched the tape, they know that. That's what defensive players study. They are there to knock the crap out of you, and even better, to knock you out of the game. That's what they're there for. If the roles,
and this is also what the Eagles did all year. I mean,
yeah,
the NFL record for sacks is like 72 in a season. They had 70.
70.
They were as good as Dolman and Millard and that Henry Thomas and that Viking front. They were as good as Hampton and McMichael and Dent and those and that Bear front. That's what we're talking about here.
Right.
So, I mean, to sit there and be like, this incredible pass rushing team rushed the passer. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
You didn't think that was going to happen?
That's what they're supposed to do. So, that being said, when it came time for me to place my bets on the game, I look at myself as I'm no longer a 49er fan. I'm a 49er supporter. So, in other words, I'm not going to make excuses for them. I'm going to call it like I see it. And I'm going to always root for them to win with my jersey on, put my kids in 49ers jerseys and things like that. But based on some of the decisions I've seen happen, and also based on Kyle's track record, I put my money on the Eagles. And I'll tell you why. I had a feeling that the game plan was going to be very similar to Dallas. When they sat there and said the game planning was done Monday, I'm like, oh, you guys didn't work hard enough. Not for this team. Because unless the game plan was, I'm going to put Poe at fullback, I'm going to put Juice at halfback, I'm going to flex both Debo and McCaffrey at wide receiver, or put Kittle out there, motion them in the block, and run straight at them. I thought that was their best chance because, again, Washington proved that if you run the ball 35 times, 40 times against them, they will wear down and you can beat them. I'm like, that's our wheelhouse. But why I doubted that is, again, the minute I heard they were done game planning Monday, I'm like, they're using the same game plan against Dallas. And that's what they did.
Well, and Dallas's line was faster, but Philly's line was way better. And I was worried about it just because, I mean, what does Philly do? They have Cox inside, Hargrave inside, and those guys are two gappers. And then you've got Sweat, who's an edge rusher, Graham, who's an edge rusher.
Mm-hmm.
But then they have all four of those guys going, and then Reddick to boot. And they basically had a 5-2 look, and Reddick's coming flying off the edge, and he's not even reading play action. He's just shooting up the field.
Mm-hmm.
And they have so much heft inside that it makes it very difficult to handle their edge players. And the Niners were, had a weakness on the right side.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, there's limits to what you can do. There's limits to what you can do to negate a great pass rush. Sometimes you just got to roll the ball out there and see what happens.
But let me ask you a question. In the second half, how many times did Purdy get sacked?
He didn't play in the second half.
He did. He played in the second. He came back in the game as the emergency.
You mean after the game was over and he was just in there?
After the game was over, and the only thing he did was run. He didn't get sacked one time. That's because when you pass the ball, 4 things can happen. Only one of them is good. 4 things can happen. Only one is good when you pass the ball. again, the 49ers got away from what they should have done in the first place.
Well,
Which is
once the
ball down
quarterback
the
was
field.
out, they had the extra guy in the box. I mean,
Doesn't matter. It doesn't
no, I
matter.
know. I knew it didn't matter. You had to run anyway, and they did
Right.
run, but it just wasn't going to work. It's like running into a wall. I mean,
It is like
you're
running
man
into,
down.
It is like running into a wall at that point, but I'm talking about the beginning of the game. The beginning of the game is when they should have really just ran. Even if they ran the ball 3 times punt, 3 times punt, 3 times punt, that turns into 6 times punt, 9 times punt, 10 times touchdown. Remember, it was like 7-14.
Yeah, but what did you want to see? You really thought they would, with no passing game to speak of, with Josh Johnson, who really hasn't played any meaningful football in years.
No. You misinterpret me.
They were going to run in on him.
Meaning, my whole point is that overall, the game was winnable with a run first offense, not a pass first offense. That's what I'm saying. The game could have been won that way. After Purdy went down, game was over.
Okay. I thought you were going there, that you thought the game wasn't over.
Oh,
no,
God,
no. Yeah, it was over.
Oh, no, no.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I said it in the pregame. I said, today is not like last week. Today, you're going to beat the Philadelphia Eagles with a rookie quarterback on the road in their place.
Yes.
You're going to have to play complementary football and dominate the time of possession and run the hell out of the football.
Exactly.
Forget the offensive balance that you've achieved up to this point. Run the ball, dominate the clock. And that was their best chance. And they couldn't.
Hurts was hurt.
They couldn't get the game going. Unfortunately, they fell behind. The quarterback gets knocked out. The rest is history.
Again, yes and no. Again, the game at that point, a head coach is going to win you 3 to 4 games a year. This was a game that a head coach should win you. For example, it's easy as throwing a flag. How many coaches do we see throw a red flag when you know daggone well they're going to lose it? They'll throw it just because of the way the game's going to break up momentum. They do it just at a chance.
Throw the red flag there. If I was Shanahan, what I would have done there, call the timeout. You have 3 of them. You waste timeouts all the time in the NFL. Call the timeout. You got your player going incomplete. You've got their player running to the line of scrimmage. Whether you get a challenge or not, call the timeout.
That's what I'm saying. So
possession means a ton there. And that was a huge play.
Right.
But, I think it was just too early in the game. He thought it was too early to waste his challenge. He didn't think about it was a blunder. I mean, it was a mistake. It was a mistake.
He should just admit it. He said, "Yeah, I screwed that up."
Yeah, I agree.
But he won't. And that's the problem. Like, did you see him in the press conference today?
He's not typically a guy that admits a lot of mistakes.
Oh my dude. The dude, his body language and everything is that of an entitled child not getting his way. He didn't want to be at the press conference. He didn't see any kind of confidence in the team moving forward or any kind of confidence in his vision. All he talked about, looking down, looking to the side, wiggling in his chair like this, like he's kind of like uncomfortable. Again, he needs to improve as a leader, and he needs to have the right people around him to be in his ear so that they can tell him things that he's missing, and he's got to listen. If he does that,
here's the only problem. Here's the problem. If I told you he does have people in his ear, but those people are sitting in a booth watching the TV copy. So he was getting the advice in his ear, but we didn't get the TV audience did not get that image until after the next play had already been called. We didn't actually get the image till after the touchdown was scored.
You know what image the whole crowd got, including TV audience? The fact that the Eagles are rushing down the field.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They were rushing down the field, and I didn't see this. I heard this. That Hufanga was motioning incomplete. I didn't see him motioning incomplete, but he was motioning incomplete from what I heard.
He did. He wasn't emphatic about it, but
he needed to be more emphatic about it. He shares in some of that blame.
The big tell is the offense, running offense. A team almost built like us, running down to hurry up and snap it. That's smart on their part.
Yeah.
And it's not very smart on our part.
Oh, I know. And it was a crucial play in the game.
Now,
He's
if
absolutely
that
crucial.
happened, we got the ball, right? And let's say we just say, okay, Bernie's offensive coordinator for the day. I'm running the ball on downs 1 and down 2. Easy. I get out 3 and out or whatever, but I'm at midfield with the number 1 defense, so I punt it. Automatically, your field position battle is now going to start swinging your way. And eventually, that's going to lead to 3 points, to 7 points, to 10 points, whatever. But the point is that Shanahan needs to improve as a head coach. He just does. If he's delusional if he thinks that he can run it back and make the same mistakes and get to the big dance. Number 2, he's also delusional in thinking that, oh, Purdy's going to come back in 6 months and be ready. Oh, Trey Lance is going to be ready. We don't know. We don't know. Trey Lance, to me, doesn't have the right instincts because he still thinks he thinks it's North Dakota State. He tries to run over people.
And there'll be no running over. There'll be no running over people or run. He's not fast enough to run around them, and he's not. And you never should run through them as a quarterback. So he's going to have to learn the nuances of playing from the pocket.
He's got to.
Hey, Papa Dragon, let me jump because I've got to get to my next live stream. Believe it or not, it's coming up in 15 minutes. But
I thought it was.
Hey, man, thanks for jumping in, and I'd love to hear more from you because I like your points. Next time I'm going live with calls, jump in, man. I'd love to hear from you.
All right. Hey, Larry, been a big fan, man. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, man.
Guys, make sure you guys like and subscribe to Larry Krueger.
Appreciate you. Papa Dragon in the house. Appreciate that, Papa. Good, kind words. BP says donation time. Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch presser was disappointing, saying they are fine with who they have, instills no confidence. They won't change and won't win a Super Bowl. Your thoughts? Talk's cheap. Pressers are easy. Action. Read actions. Don't worry about pressers. Kyle's still in a shock mode. Kyle's still in a devastated mode. Lynch was ready to talk, but doesn't have a lot of the answers right now because they don't have answers about their coaches and they don't have answers about their quarterbacks and they don't have answers about their roster. And they're still in the evaluation mode, and they should be still in the evaluation mode. They poured everything into winning games and left the offseason evaluation for the offseason, and now it's upon them. And they looked a little. Kyle looked. I don't want to say like a child, but he just looked like still upset, still very upset, having a hard time processing everything, and probably a little bitter that some of the feedback in the last 24 hours has been like, fire Kyle. But I don't really think anybody's smart as saying fire Kyle. I think people understand that Kyle has value. But I agree with Papa Dragon there. He needs to improve. He needs to evolve. I personally, is he a perfect head coach? No. But is he a top tier head coach? I would say undoubtedly yes. So, Eddie says, no, Larry, I'm in shocked mode. I'm frustrated. I'm pissed. I hear you, man. I hear you. Val says Kyle at the presser looked depleted. I think he meant defeated. You just got to remember this, man. And I've done these jobs, so I have a little experience. We all do our job. Maybe we work 40 hours. Maybe we work 50 hours. Maybe you work 55 hours. These guys work 5 a.m. to midnight from training camp all the way damn through. I mean, they're wed to this thing. They're working harder at this than we're working at our jobs. They're definitely working longer hours, much longer hours. They're immersed in it. If you don't believe that this sport ages you, look at Kyle Shanahan's initial presser and then look at a picture of him today. He's aged incredibly in this job. There's tons of stress, long hours. You're totally immersed. You're all in. You're not, there's no perspective. It's all today. What can we get better? How do we get better today? What do we have to do today? And then tomorrow. And then they work and they work and they work. He looks like a guy who needs to sit on a beach and have a cocktail and decompress. I'm not judging Kyle Shanahan too harshly on his tone or what he said or how he looked or anything from today. What's going to show is more the future and the moves they make. But I think he needs to evolve. I think he needs to get better at his job. But I also think he's one of the best doing it. And there's no doubt in my mind about that. Darian says there's no way Purdy risks his career by coming back in 6 months, knowing if he gets reconstructive surgery, he might be better. It's the Lance show now. Well, we'll see. We'll see. Too early to say. And Trey Lance needs to develop. Brock Purdy needs to get healthy and develop. We'll see what they got. That's going to do it for our live stream. I'm going to play a couple ads right here, and then we'll have a final thought, and we'll be back with more on the Krueger Show.
Larry Krueger here for Telmetrics. Thanks to Casey Bateman and the good people at Telmetrics. If you're an occupational therapist, if you're an orthopedic surgeon, a chiropractor, a physical therapist of any kind, Telmetrics is designed for you to use in your practice and will greatly benefit your patients. Telmetrics uses computer vision and artificial intelligence and provides a platform for outpatient rehab therapy services, both in the clinical and the telehealth environments. So using Telmetrics can improve your patient's experience and much more. So for all your sports injury needs, or if you're a physical rehabilitation specialist of any kind, make sure you use telmetrics.co, TELMETRIX.co. And thanks to Casey Bateman and all the good people at Telmetrics for being a proud sponsor of the Krueger. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Dan Coach Emilio. Dan is a buddy, and he is a phenomenal retirement planning specialist. And you can contact him today at securemoney.com or at his number 925-628-9966. There's a lot of uncertainty in our world right now, and you want to make sure that your money is secure. That is the key. Danny's got 25 years of experience, born and raised right here in the Bay Area, and he can help you get an immediate 10% premium bonus on your principal retirement account. So give him a call, 925-628-9966. He'll make an appointment with you, and you can sit down. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of a deal. He'll consult with you and come up with a strategy to get you going to where you want to be. Once again, 925-628-9966, securemoney.com on the web. And thanks to Dan. And thanks to Tony Casera and the good people at Casera's Italian Menswear. They are housing the Krueger Show t-shirts, and they're a proud sponsor of the show as well. The Krueger Show t-shirt, the Krueger Show podcast t-shirt is available there at their store in Dublin. Their address is 7372 San Ramon Road in Dublin, California. And go see Tony Casera and get yourself a Krueger Show t-shirt and support the show. And special thanks to our sponsor, New York Style Italian Sausage. That's right, NewYorkStyleSausage.com is their website. Phenomenal product, whether it's the breakfast sausage, the Italian mild, the Italian spicy, the chorizo. You cannot go wrong with New York Style Italian Sausage. Once again, NewYorkStyleSausage.com, often imitated, never equaled. And they are a proud sponsor of the Krueger Show. Thanks to them.
We grew up with a Sunday dinner. That means no matter how busy you were, no matter where the hell you were, you came to dinner on a Sunday night. Yeah, Sunday dinner without sausage, it's like a church without God. You know, how can you go to church if you don't believe in God? You know, and along with the sausage also became the discussions. That was discussion night. You know, it wasn't a typical family that you sit there and you're quiet, you know, and you don't talk with a mouthful. Oh no, man. Italians talk when they're eating. Italians even talk when they're sleeping. And definitely we talk with our hands. So if we can't express it through our mouth, through our lips, we express it with our hands. So, and that's what sausage is, really. It's an expression, you know, that life is good.
So New York Style Sausage was started over 70 years ago. We are the largest producer of fresh Italian sausage on the West Coast.
What makes our sausage in New York style is really the recipe came from back east, from New York, you know, from Connecticut.
If you look at all of our labels, there's maximum 4 or 5 ingredients, which we're really proud of.
There's no preservatives, no MSG, fresh in, fresh out.
The pork comes in fresh, goes out fresh. There's never any freezing throughout the process. We've always used fine quality cuts. We're never gonna deter from that. It's one of the reasons why our sausage is so good. I guarantee you put our sausage up against anybody else's from a flavor standpoint, no one will beat it, hands down.
Hey, do yourself a favor and do me a favor. Go buy a package of the New York style Italian sausage. Guaranteed you will love it. Guaranteed.
Hey Pasquale, Dan Cochimilio here for the Krueger Show. Just picked up for the very first time some of your New York style Italian sausage here at Sam's Club in Arizona. My wife just cooked it and I'm about to take a bite. Man, this is good. Pasquale, when you winked and said you guaranteed,
All right, fat fingers there. Sorry, I eliminated the Dan Cochimilio spot right there at the end by accident. Did not mean to do that. Hey, we have a new title sponsor of the Krueger Show starting today. That's right. Our brand new title sponsor of the Krueger Show is Pig in a Pickle, and you can check them out online at pigindapickle.com. They've got 2 locations. They're at the Town Center in Corte Madera, 341 Corte Madera Town Center in Corte Madera. They also have a killer location in the marketplace in Emeryville. They're open 7 days a week in Marin County, 5 days a week in Emeryville, and awesome place, man. The brisket is absolutely incredible. They've got sausages, brisket, ribs, chicken. The food is absolutely incredible. The brisket is mouth-watering. And it's a real barbecue place. So you get there early because when the food's gone, it's gone. So they may be open till 8 o'clock at night, but if the brisket's gone at 7, the brisket's gone at 7, and that's the way it is. So check it out, Pig in a Pickle, Corte Madera Town Center, 341 Corte Madera Town Center in Corte Madera. They got a location right there off the freeway. So if you're living in the North Bay, if you're living in Marin, stop in at Corte Madera and get some Pig in a Pickle. The potato chips cooked in beef fat are absolutely amazing. I mean, absolutely amazing. I'm a huge fan of the potato salad, but the brisket is just second to none. I won't even try to make brisket anymore. That's how good Pig in a Pickle's brisket is. And then in Emeryville, if you're in Emeryville, they got a really cool location right there in the public marketplace in Emeryville. I think they're closed Monday, Tuesday in Emeryville, but Wednesday through Sunday. Check them out in Emeryville, 7 days a week in Marin County. Pig in a Pickle. Pig in a Pickle. The new title sponsor of the Krueger Show. So what do I want you to do? I want everybody to go to Pig in a Pickle. And when you're going to Pig in a Pickle, I want you to tell them Larry Krueger sent us. Tell Damon, tell Mary, tell the good people at Pig in a Pickle that Larry Krueger sent you, that you're a big fan of the Krueger Show. And thanks to Damon and Mary for being proud sponsors of the Krueger Show. And we'll have a video commercial for them here starting in the coming days. But going forward, the new title sponsor of the Krueger Show, Pig in a Pickle. Check them out in Marin County and Corte Madera. Check them out in Emeryville. And thanks to Pig in a Pickle for being proud sponsors of the Krueger Show. Val Ramos says, Kyle looks sad and burnt out. He needs time off. No doubt about it. Dusty Gold just sliding over from Jason Aponte's show. Krug, 300 from 13,000, Larry. Outstanding run. Yeah, we're closing in on 13,000 subs. All right, that's going to do it for this live stream. Join us in a minute. We're jumping into our next one with Brad Graham right now on The Krueger Show.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me, getting handled. I answer to no one.